Invincible. In the territory of a conferred empire invincible. Luo Xian's body stiffened, and his face went pale in fright. Similar to the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, the Fleeting Clouds sect, as a whole, was an unranked empire as well. Above them was Huanyu Tier 2 Empire, followed by Hongyuan Tier 1 Empire, and finally, Conferred Empire. In other words, this Yang Shi was an invincible existence even in an empire 3 levels higher than theirs. It was no wonder why he didn't care for their lives at all. An expert of that level did possess the qualification to look down on them. After recovering from the shock, Luo Xian asked, "Teacher, what about Kong Shi's handwritten letter?" Their main purpose here was to secure Kong Shi's handwritten letter. But given the other party's immense might, it would surely be impossible for them to steal it from him, so what else could they do next? "You'd better forget about the matter regarding Kong Shi's handwritten letter. It is best not to get involved in matters concerning high-tier master teachers, or else it could bring a huge catastrophe to our sect." Sect leader Luo Huang instructed gravely. To live in this world, one had to know their place. If Yang Xian was only a half 5-star master teacher or even a 5-star master teacher, even if they couldn't obtain the letter, they would surely spread the news around so that he wouldn't be granted peace. But given that the other party was an 8-star master teacher, if they were to get on his bad side, that would really spell a disaster. It was an unspoken rule to never speak of the affairs of high-ranked master teachers. Even the Master Teacher Pavilion would step forward to silence them if they dared to say anything unseemly about Yang Shi. A Master Teacher of that level was a precious asset to the Master Teacher Pavilion. It would be wise to feign ignorance of the matter unless one was tired of living. Yes. Luo Xian hurriedly nodded his head. Just as the saying goes, a retainer should never gossip about their emperor. To gossip about one's superior was insubordination in itself, and in the strict hierarchy of master teachers, that could possibly warrant death. Also, from today onward, try to avoid contact with those from White Helios sect. They are already done for, sect leader Luo Huang said. White Helios sect was another gigantic sect of a similar scale to their Fleeting Clouds sect. In fact, there was a chance that the other party might overtake them in the near future to become the strongest power among the 28 regional powers. But it was a pity that they offended Yang Shi, and their sect leader was killed. Even if Yang Shi was magnanimous enough to spare the White Helios sect, the other sects would still try to avoid them for fear of getting on Yang Shi's bad side. In fact, there might even be some, especially their enemies, who would make use of this opportunity to get even with them. It probably wouldn't take long for them to be split among the other powers and disappear in the annals of history. This was the influence that a high-tier master teacher possessed. Every single action of theirs could easily cause a chain effect. In fact, even if Yang Shi didn't make a move, just a word of his could make the other sects charge forward and tear him and sect leader by apart. It was precisely the reason why he was willing to sacrifice himself just to have Yang Shi's word to spare his sect. As long as Yang Shi expressed his agreement to the matter, the other sects, in deference to Yang Shi, wouldn't dare go that far. After all, if Yang Shi had agreed to sparing the Fleeting Clouds sect, an attack on them would mean defying Yang Shi, and that was no different from courting death. The same scene was also occurring in the other sections. The pressure from Yang Shi's appearance was simply too great. Even if they wanted to spread rumors about Kong Shi's handwritten letter, Huanyu Empire Master Teacher Pavilion would surely stop and silence them. In the courtyard, everything regained calmness once more. The 14 powers who had come haughtily all ended up leaving with their heads lowered after paying 20 middle-tier spirit stones each. Yang Shi, looking at the expert in the air, Pavilion Master Kong, Su Shi, and the others bowed respectfully. You've done well. I'll go to your branch to conduct a lesson when I'm free." Yang Shi nodded his head in satisfaction. "Thank you, Yang Shi." Hearing the promise, Pavilion Master Kong and the others were delighted. That was possibly an 8-star master teacher. A single lesson of his could possibly save years of needless effort from their part. "All right, you all should leave for now." After making the promise, Yang Shi casually waved them away. "Yes. Hurriedly nodding their heads, Pavilion Master Kong, Alliance Head Zhao, and the others were about to leave when Yang Shi suddenly instructed, "Wait a moment. Free their bindings first before leaving." Zheng Yang, Sun Cheng, and the others' mouths had been bound by sect leader Luo Huangzhenqi for trying to explain Zhang Shi's actions. Not expecting the formidable Yang Shi to ask them to solve something so simple, Pavilion Master Kong and the others were stunned for a moment. Even so, they stepped forward and freed the few people of their restraints and fed them pills to heal their injuries. After all was done, they clasped their fists and bowed. "We'll be taking our leave then." Yang Shi nodded with his head tilted upward, seemingly thinking of something deep and profound. Then, with an unfathomable expression, he placed his hands behind his back and started walking toward the distance. Expert. This is a true expert. Seeing the other party's disposition and means, Pavilion Master Kong and Alliance Head Zhao found themselves filled with awe for him. If this didn't constitute as an expert, nothing in the world could. Despite being a high-rank master teacher, Yang Shi didn't abuse his authority and strength and, instead, remained humble and magnanimous. Even though the other party had already barged into his residence, he allowed them to leave after paying some middle-tier spirit stones. And after all was done, he flung his sleeves and left freely, caring not for the matters of the secular world at this moment. All they felt for the other party was endless respect and awe. They bowed to see the other party off when they suddenly heard the sound of something falling from the sky. Sounds reminiscent of Putong and Aya could be heard. It seemed like someone had fallen from the sky. They quickly raised their gazes to look around, but Yang Shi had already disappeared. All that was left was an endless blue sky. Did Yang Shi just fall down? The few of them glanced at one another in disbelief. The person who had just fallen from the sky couldn't possibly be Yang Shi, right? But as soon as this idea popped into their mind, they immediately shook their heads. You must be joking. Yang Shi was very possibly an 8-star master teacher. At that level of cultivation, even an entire day of flight wouldn't result in his exhaustion. How could he possibly suddenly fall from the sky? He must have moved too fast such that he had disappeared from their eyes. After reasoning it out within themselves, they hurriedly left the area. To think that the old master would be so formidable. Grand Teacher is indeed incredible. After the departure of the few people, the courtyard fell silent. Sun Cheng, Zheng Yang, and the others were still relishing in the excitement from watching Yang Shi's incredible show of strength. Only Wang Ying rushed straight into the courtyard anxiously. While everyone had been busy recuperating from their injuries, her eyes were fixated on Yang Shi, and she saw how his face paled and fell from the sky. If the other party was truly an 8-star master teacher, how could he possibly get exhausted by that short moment of flight and fall from the sky? Zhang Shi must have used some sort of unique method to push himself so as to resolve the crisis. Upon rushing into the inner courtyard, she glanced at the area where Yang Shi fell toward and saw a slight depression on the ground around the size of a head. Most likely, the other party must have crashed into the ground head first. But why wasn't there anyone around? Where is he? After overexerting himself and falling from a high altitude, the other party must be injured. But why wasn't he around? Wang Ying was worried. Wang Ying, what are you doing here instead of channeling the medicinal energy from the pill to heal your wounds? Just as Wang Ying was about to continue searching, a nonchalant voice sounded. Turning around, she saw Zhang Shi standing not too far away with a frown on his face. With a flushed face, Wang Ying hurriedly explained, "Teacher, I seem to have seen Yang Shi falling from the sky, and in fear that he might be injured, I came over to take a look." Injured? You must be jesting. How could a person of my teacher's caliber get injured? Frowning, Zhang Shi waved his hands casually. All right, you should leave and focus on your recuperation. I'm currently discussing Lu Chang's issue with teacher, and I don't wish to be interrupted. Yes, teacher. Seeing that Zhang Shi's clothes were completely intact, devoid of any signs that he had just fallen from the sky, Wang Ying could only clasp her fist and leave. She was truly perplexed by this bizarreness. Was she really mistaken? Were Yang Shi and Zhang Shi two different people? Otherwise, how could Zhang Shi possibly be completely fine after falling from the sky, to the extent that there wasn't the slightest disturbance in his jinqi? Gritting her teeth, Wang Ying thought confidently, even if I'm mistaken about this matter, I'm certain about the mark Mo Huncheng left on teacher's neck. She had made sure to verify the mark multiple times previously, and she was certain of it. Even if she failed to prove anything this time, she was confident of her conjecture. I should try to look for teacher the next time Yang Shi appears, Wang Ying thought. Since Zhang Shi refused to admit the matter, it would be inappropriate for her to ask about it. The only way she could verify her theory was to confirm that Zhang Shi was absent whenever Yang Shi was around. If she could prove that, then there was high chance that they were the same person. By then, Zhang Shi wouldn't be able to refute her argument anymore. With such a thought, Wang Ying left. As soon as she left, Zhang Xian immediately smiled bitterly and returned to his room. If Wang Ying was still present at this moment, she would surely be able to verify that Yang Shi and Zhang Shi were the same person from his back view. That's because the back of Zhang Shi's head was cloaked with dust. In fact, even his pants were completely soiled. If not for the stone pillars hiding his figure, he would have surely been exposed. Returning to the room, Zhang Xian quickly changed his clothes, and only then did he heave a sigh of relief. Wang Ying's conjecture was spot on, Yang Shi was indeed him. If he had appeared as Zhang Xian just now, it was likely that a fight would have broken out. Given his current cultivation realm, he wouldn't be a match for all of those experts. Left without a choice, he could disguise himself and appear as Yang Shi. As for the powerful aura he exuded, that mainly came from Mo Huncheng. After being trapped in the Nine Hearts Lotus for so many years, the other party's grasp over his cultivation became weak, and the only thing impressive about him at the moment was his disposition. But in this situation, it happened to be what Zhang Xian needed the most. Due to the other party's accumulation over the years, the powerful aura the other party's soul exuded was comparable to even a half-saint. On top of that, in order to further convince the crowd of his cultivation, Zhang Xian appeared from the skies. From the very start, everyone was already convinced that he was a saint, and that was the main reason why he wasn't exposed. As for sect leader Luo Huang's injuries, it was caused by Zhang Xian's ability as a soul oracle. His current soul cultivation was at Transcendent Mortal 4 Dan Pinnacle. While it would be hard for him to match the other party in a straightforward fight in a battle of souls, Zhang Xian would never lose to the other party. After all, a consonant spirit realm expert would have barely started the cultivation of his soul. There was no way a novice soul could match up to a powerful soul which had even been tempered by the Yin-Yang Lake. But still, if sect leader Luo Huang had retaliated, Zhang Xian's attack might have collapsed, and he would be exposed. It was fortunate the impression of Yang Shi's invincibility as a saint had been deeply imprinted into sect leader Luo Huang's mind, thus making him dare not retaliate at all for fear of inducing the other party's wrath. As for the soul impartation afterward, while it did look formidable, it was actually rather simple. Back then, Mo Huncheng had also transferred the soul cultivation techniques to him via the same method, and after grasping it, it wasn't too difficult for him to do the same to Shui Yao as well. And regarding the demon sink beast's breakthrough, it was something he had done on many occasions before. Everything was perfect, and the only flaw was the red dust heaven ascending steps. Even with his higher cultivation and jinqi capacity, he could still only sustain flight for 10 minutes or so. Naturally, the reason why he fell vertically down was due to his jinqi being sapped dry. It was fortunate that no one noticed it. Otherwise, all of his effort from before would have gone to waste. Sigh, what is this? It was just a moment ago that he inspired everyone's awe and fear. Yet, the next instant, he ended up crashing into the ground and nearly spewing blood. The huge contrast between the two left Zhang Xian dismal. The red dust heaven ascending step was indeed formidable, and being able to fly was something to rejoice about. However, during its course of activation, one was unable to sense the amount of jinqi one had left, thus creating a high tendency for one to abruptly fall from the sky. It was fortunate that Zhang Xian was able to sustain all the way to the end. Otherwise, if he were to fall in the midst of threatening the others, it would have been hard to explain himself. Looks like Wang Ying managed to see through my disguise. Recalling how Wang Ying rushed into the inner courtyard and the doubt on her face, Zhang Xian shook his head. Given that Wang Ying noticed something as well, there was a good chance that the others might have noticed something as well. If others were to learn that the unparalleled Yang Shi was just a made-up character, the group from before would surely return to cripple him. Looks like I should forge my clone soon. With a clone, I would be able to appear simultaneously in both identities, and no one will doubt me anymore. Zhang Xian clasped his fists tightly. He had learnt the soul-severing technique from Emo Hunsheng, and using the 9 Hearts Lotus as the foundation, it wouldn't be too difficult for him to forge a clone. However, it would require vast amount of spiritual energy for him to do so, and thus, he had been putting off the matter. However, with at least 600 middle-tier spirit stones in his possession at the moment, he could afford such expenditure already. I should raise my cultivation first. The 9 Hearts Lotus hadn't matured yet, and the best way to induce its maturity was through vast quantity of Heaven's Path Shinchi. With so many middle-tier spirit stones in his hand now, that wasn't a problem. Flicking his wrist, Zhang Xian took out the spirit-gathering formation plate, activated it, and sat in the middle of the formation. Following which, he casually threw out a dozen of middle-tier spirit stones and began driving the Heaven's Path divine art. The dense spiritual energy in the surroundings began rushing into his body. The overwhelming spiritual energy flowing through his body left Zhang Xian with an indescribably soothing sensation, and warm tears gathered in his eyes. In the past 2 months, he had been suffering from a huge shortage of spirit stones, resulting in a huge need for him to be thrifty. This was the first time he could afford to cultivate so extravagantly. It seemed like there was a need for him to extort from those fellows a few more times in the future. After all, he would surely need even more spirit stones in the future. Hung long long. Under the surge of spiritual energy, his consumed Jinqi was swiftly replenished, and soon, with a slight buzzing sound, he reached Transcendent Mortal 2 Dan Pinnacle. But Zhang Xian didn't just stop there. Origin Energy Realm Pinnacle. Yin-Yang Realm Primary Stage. Yin-Yang Realm Pinnacle. 2 hours later, Zhang Xian successfully reached Transcendent Mortal 3 Dan Pinnacle. His Jinqi strength totaled up to 1 million ding, which was 200,000 ding greater than other Yin-Yang Realm Pinnacle cultivators. That was already comparable to a Clarifying Turbidity Realm Primary Stage cultivator. Adding the strength of 1,600,000 ding derived from his soul cultivation, the maximum strength he could wield at the moment was a hulking 2,600,000 ding. With this strength, he could even match a consonant spirit realm intermediate stage expert. That was something completely unheard of. Now, I should nurture the 9 Hearts Lotus, as Zhang Xian didn't have sufficient Transcendent Mortal 4 Dan cultivation techniques to form the corresponding complete Heaven's Path divine art, he could only stop here. Thus, flicking his wrist, he took out the 9 Hearts Lotus, grabbed it, and began infusing huge amount of Jinqi in. Don't kill me, but as soon as Jinqi seeped into the lotus, a sound reminiscent of a pig being butchered echoed in the air. Emo Hunsheng. Ah, pardon me. I forgot your existence. Too anxious to nurture the lotus to maturity, Zhang Xian forgot that the fellow hiding in the lotus was particularly fearful of Heaven's Path Jinqi. Emo Hunsheng was in tears. I had just expended myself to save you and you actually forgot about me so quickly. How heartless can you be? Don't worry. I'll pull you out now, Zhang Xian said sheepishly. As long as Emo Hunsheng remained in the lotus, he wouldn't be able to drive the lotus's maturity with his Jinqi. As a 6-star soul oracle, Emo Hunsheng would be able to survive for a very long time out of the lotus. Otherwise, Zhang Xian could also loan him the soulless metal humanoid to house his soul. As for how he should get Emo Hunsheng out, Zhang Xian had already thought of an idea. Since the other party needed a soul to take his place so that he could escape, he would just have to make one for him. Soul Severing Technique. Seated cross-legged, Zhang Xian drew his soul out. Then, following the method which Emo Hunsheng taught him beforehand, he began splitting his soul in two. Since there was no other soul he could use, he would just have to use his own. Furthermore, it just so happened that Zhang Xian wanted to use the Nine Hearts Lotus to forge a clone. A portion of his soul would have to enter the Nine Hearts Lotus eventually, so this wasn't a problem at all. Absorbing the dense spiritual energy from the surroundings, Zhang Xian slowly tore his soul into two. The severing of a soul was, in essence, no different from tearing one's body into two. The pain that one had to suffer during the process was unimaginable. Furthermore, it was an extremely risky technique. The slightest mistake could possibly result in the dissipation of one's soul. If not for having brought the technique up to the level of Heaven's Path, he would have surely dared not cultivate this technique. The success rate was simply too low. Back then, it had taken astounding luck on Emo Hunsheng's part to successfully split his soul in two. Soon, the 3 meters large soul was severed into two human-sized ones. Done. After severing his soul, Zhang Xian had one portion return back to his physical body before exhaling deeply. At his moment, his face was incomparably white. Most probably, I won't be able to utilize my soul energy for a period of time. This was unlike what he did in the case of Lu Chong, where he only needed to sever a small portion of it. This time, his soul was divided in two. It would take at least 2 months for him to recover to his original condition. He had to avoid using his soul energy during this period of time, or else he would risk aggravating his injuries. Chapter 568, Forging the Clone. But still, it was all worth it. His soul was divided into two, but he could sense the consciousness of the two, as though his existence had been split in two. Even though his fighting prowess had gone down for the time being, once he recovers, his strength would increase greatly. Furthermore, given that both minds were linked, and they could communicate via mere thoughts, once they collaborate together, the strength wouldn't be as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. With perfect teamwork, it could easily be 3, 4, or even higher. On top of that, the severed soul was capable of cultivating as well. As time passed, it would only grow stronger and stronger. Time to begin. The soul glanced at the original body and smiled faintly before dashing into the Nine Hearts Lotus. Who? As soon as it approached the lotus, it immediately felt an overwhelmingly powerful suction force pulling it into a dark space. Master. After the soul steadied itself, Zhang Xian saw a middle-aged man standing not too far away. The middle-aged man clasped his fist and greeted the soul respectfully. Emo Hunsheng. Considering how that fellow was a 6-star soul oracle and how long he had lived, Zhang Xian thought that the other party would be an elderly with white hair and beard. Yet, to his surprise, the other party looked like a fragile scholar instead. Having signed the soul contract, even though Emo Hunsheng had successfully escaped from the Nine Hearts Lotus, he was still Zhang Shi's subordinate. If he were to harbor the slightest thought of defiance, Zhang Shi could easily crush him with a thought. Is this your original appearance? Zhang Xian's divided soul asked. As an intangible existence, souls could be morphed to take on any shape. Yes. The soul of a soul oracle retains the appearance it had when it was first drawn from the body. This appearance of mine will still remain the same even if I live for another 10,000 years, Emo Hunsheng replied. While souls could be morphed into countless shapes, they would still have a default appearance, which was the form of the body when the soul was first drawn from the body. I'm here to replace you. You can leave now. The severed soul waved his hand. However, I can't find a suitable body for you at the moment. You can possess the soulless metal humanoid for the time being. Once I find a physical body suitable for you, I'll allow you to possess it. While Emo Hunsheng was powerful enough to exist outside in his soul form, as time passed, he would still suffer from the 5 declines and grow weaker. The only way to prevent that was for him to possess a suitable body. As a master teacher, Zhang Xian couldn't possibly allow his subordinate to possess any innocent bystander. Thus, he could only have the other party possess the soulless metal humanoid for the time being. As the soulless metal humanoid was a body forged specially for the use of soul oracles, diving in and out of it wouldn't incur the possession decline. It's no problem. As long as I can leave this darn place, I'm willing to stay anywhere. Mo Huncheng nodded his head excitedly. He was about to be driven mad from being trapped here for several 10,000 years. As long as he could escape this place, he didn't mind possessing the soulless metal humanoid for the time being. Besides, Zhang Shi had also promised to find a fitting body for him to possess too. There was nothing for him to hesitate for. I'll be heading out first then. With a bright glow from his soul, Mo Huncheng dashed out of the Nine Hearts Lotus. Seemingly realized that Mo Huncheng was about to leave, a powerful energy lurking in the dark space crept toward him in an attempt to keep him here. However, Zhang Xian's severed soul harumphed and blocked its path. Who? The energy was halted for a split moment, and making use of this opportunity, Mo Huncheng leaped out of the Nine Hearts Lotus and appeared in the outside world. You're out. Zhang Xian glanced at him. Yes. Having regained his freedom, Mo Huncheng glanced at his surroundings in agitation. You should enter the soulless metal humanoid for the time being. With a slight smile, Zhang Xian flicked his wrist and took out a coffin housing a soulless metal humanoid. Nodding his head, Mo Huncheng opened the coffin and dived into the soulless metal humanoid. The next moment, the eyes of the soulless metal humanoid opened, and it stood up. Master. A human-height puppet walked toward Zhang Xian and bowed grandly, as though a valiant commander greeting his superior. You should call me young master like the others. Zhang Xian waved his hands. Yes, young master. The humanoid clasped his fist. Glancing at the humanoid, Zhang Xian asked, how strong are you at the moment, and how much of your strength can you exert at the moment? Given Mo Huncheng's powerful cultivation, there was a good chance that the other party was more powerful than him now that he was freed from the Nine Hearts Lotus, even when he was within the soulless metal humanoid. I was the one who crafted these soulless metal humanoids, so I can bring out almost 100% of my strength in them. Mo Huncheng replied. 100%? Meaning, you can bring out the full strength of a transcendent mortal 9-dan expert? Zhang Xian's eyes lit up. The other party was only inches away from achieving the breakthrough to half-saint before he was trapped in the Nine Hearts Lotus. Even though he had expended much of his soul energy throughout the years, he was still able to retain his cultivation of transcendent mortal 9-dan. Didn't this mean that he had a transcendent mortal 9-dan subordinate beside him now? With such an expert, even without Yang Shi's presence, no one would dare to cause him any trouble. Mo Huncheng nodded. Not bad. For the time being, guard the entrance and don't allow anyone to enter. I'm going to forge my clone and I don't want anyone to interrupt me. Zhang Xian instructed. Mo Huncheng nodded and left the room. After which, Zhang Xian turned his attention to the Nine Hearts Lotus, and a serious expression appeared on his face. Time to start. With a flick of his finger, a surge of Jinqi gushed into the Nine Hearts Lotus. The Heaven's Path Jinqi was deadly to Mo Huncheng due to the imperfections of his soul-guiding method, but Zhang Xian's severed soul didn't possess such weakness. As Zhang Xian pumped his Jinqi into the Nine Hearts Lotus, its black surface gradually turned white. This showed that it was gradually maturing. The lotus required a vast quantity of Heaven's Path Jinqi to mature, but fortunately, Zhang Xian had sufficient middle-tier spirit stones on hand. After a period of time, with a light jolt, the last shred of darkness disappeared from the surface of the lotus, resulting in a perfectly milky white appearance. As expected of a god artifact. With just a glance, Zhang Xian felt a jolt run through his body, and he couldn't help but feel allured by the Nine Hearts Lotus. Previously, the lotus was as black as ink, similar to a demonic tool. However, at this instant, it felt like a treasure that had come from the highest heavens, an inviolable item. Every single aspect of it spelled extraordinary. He could foresee that if its existence were to be made known to the public, a huge fight for it would occur. Even 7-star or 8-star master teachers would find themselves unable to hold back their greed. After all, master teachers were still mortals as well. Unlike true saints, they possessed worldly desires and experienced negative emotions too. Even the wise Kong Shi had once destroyed an entire kingdom out of rage when his student was killed, needless to say, others. Forge. Knowing how precious this item was, Zhang Xian decided to get it done as soon as possible. Thus, without any hesitation, he grabbed the lotus and infused a surge of Jinqi into it. Mo Hunsheng had imparted the way of forging a physical body to him, and it wasn't a very complicated process. He enveloped the entire lotus with his Jinqi to facilitate the fusing of his severed soul along with the lotus. At the same time, the Jinqi also tempered the lotus, and slowly, a flawless body was being formed. After some time, the severed soul had fused perfectly with the body, and the formation of the body was complete. Slowly, the pair of eyes on the body opened. Done! Seeing his clone getting to his feet, Zhang Xian smiled in delight. Two pair of eyes in the room stared at one another, and Zhang Xian suddenly felt a very peculiar sensation. It was as if he was looking into a mirror. At a moment, it felt as though he was the other party, and in the next, it felt as though the other party was him. As the clone was forged from his soul, it shared the same consciousness as the original body. In fact, even the knowledge and battle techniques they cultivated were shared as well. In other words, if the clone were to read through a book, the original body would learn the same knowledge as well. But of course, this was all there was to it. The cultivation of the two of them was still separate. Currently, the clone is still in its nascent form. The bulk of his cultivation consists from my severed soul. I should first raise its cultivation first. The newborn clone possessed no strength whatsoever. Even if it did, it mainly originated from the soul fused into the body. It had to start its cultivating its Jinqi from scratch. After wearing clothes, the clone sat at the center of the spirit-gathering formation formed by the formation plate. Jai. Jai. The clone began cultivating according to the Heaven's Path divine art. A moment later, Zhang Xian frowned. He had cultivated the Heaven's Path divine art before, and he was very familiar with it. Yet, why was his clone unable to do the same? The moment his clone tried to do so, an immense pressure would push down on it, threatening to reduce the body into dust if he were to push on. A conjecture appeared in Zhang Xian's mind. Could it be that other than my original body, no one else can cultivate Heaven's Path divine art, not even my clone? He did try to impart the complete Heaven's Path divine art to his students before, but none of them had been able to cultivate it for some reason. Left with no choice, he could only modify it or introduce a few minor flaws into the technique. He thought that it might just be a matter of level of comprehension, but from the looks of it now, given that his clone shared the same consciousness as him, that wasn't the case. This might have something to do with the Library of Heaven's Path. Zhang Xian thought. The Library of Heaven's Path had been accompanying him since his rebirth. Perhaps it was only because of its existence that he was able to cultivate the Heaven's Path divine art. On the other hand, his clone, even though it was sharing his soul, due to the non-existence of the Library of Heaven's Path to it, was unable to cultivate the Heaven's Path divine art. Most likely, the Library of Heaven's Path was a loophole in the world in itself. The heavens would never allow anyone to peer into its essence, and the very concept of perfection is non-existent in the world. This is a law of the world, and those who attempted to break it would find themselves hindered. Since it's impossible, I just have to modify it then. Since Heaven's Path divine art was out of question, Zhang Xian would have to introduce some minor flaws into it. He had done the same for Xiaoye and the others as well, so it wasn't too difficult for him to do so. Gugugugu. Cultivating the Heaven's Path divine art with some minor flaws introduced, the clone could finally circulate his Jinqi smoothly without any hiccups, and his aura began growing more and more powerful as his cultivation surged. As expected of a physical body forged by a god artifact, the cultivation speed of Xiaoye and the others couldn't begin to compare with it. In just 3 short days, it progressed all the way from Fighter 1 Dan Jushi realm to Transcendent Mortal 3 Dan Yin-Yang realm pinnacle. In other words, the clone possessed strength equivalent to him now. While part of the reason was due to there being sufficient spirit stones to fuel his cultivation, it was still a shocking feat. This would suffice. There's no need for it to cultivate battle techniques since we can just share them via our souls. Given that the clone and the main body shared a common consciousness, they could easily share knowledge. Even without any practice, the clone was able to execute Heaven's Path battle techniques at the same level of the original. But of course, these had to have some minor flaws introduced into them as well. Let's see how powerful it is. Come, give me a punch. Zhang Xian looked at his clone with a smile. Since there was no strength measuring rock pillar in the room, there was no way to ascertain the current strength of the clone precisely. However, Zhang Xian could still fathom a rough gauge through trying it out with his own body. Who? The clone sent a punch over, and with a casual smile, Zhang Xian faced it with one of his own too. The 2 punches collided. Pang! Before Zhang Xian could react, he felt a sharp pain on his arm, as though he had been struck by a humongous mountain. He was immediately sent flying, and his head crashed through several layers of walls before being planted in the rock-filled courtyard. The heck, what is this? Zhang Xian cried. Chapter 569, Mo Gaoyuan seeks an audience. Sorry, but our young master is currently in seclusion, he isn't meeting any guests. In the residence, Sun Cheng looked at 2 individuals apologetically. The 2 individuals were Elder Hu and Master Teacher Song Chao. Upon knowing that Zhang Shi was back, they visited the residence every day no matter how many times the sharp-tongued Sun Cheng tried to chase them away. I know, but the tournament is going to begin tomorrow. No matter what, Zhang Shi has to come out of his seclusion today. Elder Hu smiled awkwardly. Even though the 14 powers had hushed all news regarding that incident back then, as one of the powers involved in the tournament, Elder Hu did know a thing or two about it. To be able to chase away so many powerful experts and keep them completely silenced about the matter afterward, Zhang Shi's background must be astounding. Thus, even though his original intention was only to buy the soulless metal humanoid, he eventually ended up visiting every day in hopes of forging a close relationship with this Zhang Shi. Even though that's true, I can't guarantee you that the young master will come out of his seclusion today. Sun Cheng nodded his head. Ever since young master returned, he had locked himself in his room, and it had been half a month since then. Also, the old master also appeared that once. After that incident, he disappeared without a trace. Even Sun Cheng himself couldn't verify whether these 2 individuals were truly still in the residence. That after Zhang Shi is out of his seclusion, can Butler Sun send someone to inform me of the matter? I'm sure you can tell that I'm really interested in buying the soulless metal humanoid, Elder Hu said. This Sun Cheng frowned, and the disposition of a high-rank master teacher's butler naturally flowed out of him. I don't have the rights to make such a decision. It'll depend on the will of the young master. If he is unwilling to meet you, I can't force a meeting either. Ever since that day, Sun Cheng's standing had been on a nearly vertical rise, and even Alliance Head Zhao and Pavilion Master Kong had to visit him personally. As time went by, the authority and prestige he enjoyed gradually built on his disposition. Indeed, a person of Zhang Shi's caliber can't possibly entertain everyone who comes knocking at his door. Elder Hu played along with Sun Cheng. Of course. The young master is a man of great stature. Even sect leader Luo Huang of the Fleeting Clouds sect has been chased away by me in the past few days. Sun Cheng spoke proudly. Sect leader Luo Huang had paid his visit the past few days, but before he could even reach the entrance, he was already chased away by the guards with sticks in their hands. You must be joking. Surely you should have thought of this possibility when you came to attack us. To apologize only after learning of our old masters might. Do you think that there is really such a good deal in the world? Indeed. A person like Zhang Shi is destined for great things. How could it be possibly to meet him that easily? All I hope is that Butler's son could help to speak up on my behalf before the other party, elder whose mouth twitched, but he hurriedly continued with his fawning. But before he could finish his words, a loud explosion sounded, and following which, they saw a figure being planted onto the ground before them. Audacious! Do you think that Zhang Shi's residence is a place where you can wreak havoc? Seeing how the other party actually dared to make a move here, even going to the extent of tearing down the walls, elder who was just about to display his goodwill toward Zhang Shi when Butler's son rushed forward and asked worriedly, "Young master, what's wrong?" "Young master." Zhang Shi. Elder whose vision darkened, and his body swayed weakly. For an instant, he felt as though blood was regurgitating in his mouth, threatening to spew out at any moment. That dirty and unkempt beggar who was head planted into the ground was Zhang Shi. A man of great stature. How was that fellow whose head was planted into the ground and was chewing on soil in his mouth had anything to do with great stature? He had just gone along with Butler's son to praise Zhang Shi to the point that the latter seemed no different from a deity from the heavens when the latter sudden appeared in such a manner. Elder who felt as though he was about to cry. And he wasn't the only one who felt that way. Standing beside him, Song Chao's mouth was also twitching violently. Having met Zhang Shi a few times before, he was able to recognize the other party at first sight. There was no doubt that unseemly person on that floor was indeed Zhang Shi. The previous few times, the other party carried such a refined and authoritative disposition that he couldn't help but feel awed toward, but now this was simply too much of an image changer. Cough cough cough. Plucking his head out of the ground, Zhang Xian felt dismayed. Despite being at Transcendent Mortal 3 Dan Pinnacle as well, not to mention, he cultivated the complete Heaven's Path divine art, and yet, he was nearly beaten to death by his clone. What the heck was this? For the main body to be unable to match up to the clone, wasn't he really too useless? But while he was dismayed, he soon understood the underlying reason behind this matter. Regardless, the body of his clone was forged out of the 9 Hearts Lotus, a god artifact. Even though the cultivation technique his clone was cultivating was weaker than his, just the might of the physical body itself was easy to make up for its deficiency and even exceed the original body. It would be no joke to say that the clone was an invincible existence in his class. Unless Zhang Xian continued to cultivate the Heaven's Path golden body and reached the very limits of it. Otherwise, for a long time, he would remain outclassed by his clone. Forget it, since the one stronger than myself is myself, there's no need for me to feel so frustrated over it, Zhang Xian consoled himself. In any case, both bodies could be considered as a part of him, so there was nothing for him to get depressed over. Seeing Butler's son's worried look, Zhang Xian patted the dust off his robe and replied, "I'm fine, there's nothing to worry about. It's just that I met some minor problems with my cultivation a moment ago." "All right." Even though Sun Chang was perplexed to hear that the other party had met with some problems in his cultivation, he suppressed his doubt and clasped his fist. "Young master, Elder Hu and Master Teacher Song Chao from the Blue Frost sect is here. They are interested in buying your soulless metal humanoid, and they've been visiting for the past few days." After a moment of contemplation, Zhang Xian suddenly recalled the matter. Song Chao. Soulless metal humanoid? Back then, in the southern herb garden, Zhang Xian convinced Song Chao to purchase a metal coffin for 1 middle-tier spirit stone, and he promised the latter that as long as he brought sufficient money, he would sell the remaining 3 soulless metal humanoid to him. But currently, Mo Huncheng needed the soulless metal humanoid to house his soul. On top of that, there was a need to keep spare in case one of them wore out in the midst of battle. If Zhang Xian were to sell all of them, it would be impossible for him to find a second one in the world. After all, the occupation of soul oracles had already gone extinct in the world, and the number of soulless metal humanoid was extremely limited in the world. It would be no exaggeration to say that the odds were that he would never find a 5th one in the world. Besides, Zhang Xian didn't lack middle-tier spirit stones at the moment, so he wasn't as keen to sell them at the moment. "Zhang Shi, I am Elder Hu from Blue Frost sect. I believe you have met Master Teacher Song Chao before." After a moment of hesitation, Elder Hu and Song Chao stepped forward. Pleased to meet you, Elder Hu. Zhang Xian clasped his fist and greeted the other party. After which, he scratched his head sheepishly and replied, "Pardon me. I did have 3 soulless metal humanoid in my hands before, but you came too late. I've already sold them already. I'm afraid that you have made a wasted trip." It wasn't convenient for him to talk about Imo Hunsheng, so he decided to just claim that he had already sold the soulless metal humanoids. "You've sold all of them?" Not expecting for such a hiccup to occur, Elder Hu was taken aback. "Indeed. You should also know that hidden in the soulless metal humanoids are the secrets of the soul oracles. There are simply too many people interested in buying them, and I only had a few of them in my hands." Zhang Xian waved his hands apologetically when the ground suddenly rumbled, and a towering figure rushed into the hall. "Young master, what happened? Are you all right?" Imo Hunsheng asked worriedly. He had been standing guard outside the room so as to ensure the young master's safety. Yet, somehow, the young master still ended up being sent flying. Alarmed, he hurriedly rushed over to check on the young master's condition. "This is a living soulless metal humanoid." Elder Hu's vision went dark. "Big brother, didn't you just say that you've already sold all of the soulless metal humanoid? For a living one to walk out the next moment, what the heck was this?" Cough cough. Zhang Xian also didn't expect to be exposed right after he uttered the lie, so his face went red in embarrassment. This is not a metal humanoid. It is a guard of mine which cultivated a unique battle technique that resulted in his current appearance." "A unique battle technique?" Elder Hu and Song Chao's bodies swayed weakly. "Do you really think we are blind? This is obviously a soulless metal humanoid, right? We are all fellow master teachers. No matter how bad our eyes of discernment are, we can at least distinguish between a normal guard and a puppet." "All right." But even so, since the other was clearly unwilling to broach the topic, they weren't in a good position to ask either. After all, while the soulless metal humanoid was important, it wasn't worth getting on Zhang Shi's bad side for it. After chatting a while longer, they confirmed that Zhang Shi had no intentions whatsoever to sell the soulless metal humanoid, and thus, Elder Hu and Song Chao could only leave in disappointment. Before the both of them left, Zhang Xian instructed them sternly not to spread any news regarding the sentient soulless metal humanoid. Right after the duo left, Zhang Xian immediately turned to the tall, golden figure beside him and berated furiously, "For you to run out in such a form, are you that afraid that no one would recognize you?" The topic of soulless metal humanoids was intricately linked with the soul oracles. If one were to be found running about freely, there would surely bring a huge uproar, and the Master-Teacher Pavilion might even choose to conduct an investigation. If so, things would get troublesome. Imo Hunsheng also knew that he was too reckless, so he was feeling a little sheepish. But still, considering that the other party had been trapped for innumerable years in the Nine Hearts Lotus prior to this, he couldn't really be blamed for his lack of consideration. Thus, Zhang Xian put the matter aside and asked instead, "Is there any way for you to conceal your appearance and aura?" Imo Hunsheng contemplated for a moment before replying. "There is a way, but it might take a few days." "That's good. Then, for the next few days, you should try to stay out of public view." Seeing that there was indeed a way for Imo Hunsheng to conceal his aura and his appearance, Zhang Xian nodded his head. Then, turning to Sun Chang, he asked, "Butler's son, in the past few days that I've been in seclusion, did anything happen?" For the past half a month since he had returned, he had been in seclusion. Thus, there was a need for him to catch up with the latest happenings. Reporting to young master, ever since the old master's previous appearance, the other sects and empires have toned it down and the city has become much more peaceful. In the past few days, Pavilion Master Kong, Alliance Head Zhao, and Princess Fei Wu have been coming by every day, but after confirming that you were still in seclusion each time, they would leave in disappointment, Sun Chang said. The old master's presence had humbled all of the powers in the city. The arrogant geniuses of powerful sects and empires had become as obedient as domesticated kittens, not daring to cause any trouble at all in fear of getting on Yang Shi's bad side. After all, the wrath of an 8-star master teacher was something that neither they nor their sects could bear. After thinking for a moment, Sun Chang continued, also the perpetrator of the entire incident, Ding Hong, has been killed by sect leader Luo Huang of Fleeting Clouds sect. In truth, Zhang Xian had wanted to get rid of that ticking time bomb that night, but as he was disguised as Yang Xian, he would surely have exposed his true cultivation if he were to make a move personally. Besides, it was beneath Yang Shi to make a move on such an insignificant ant. As such, he'd had no choice but to hold himself back. However, it seemed like the sect leader of Fleeting Clouds sect was indeed a smart man. He probably knew of Yang Shi's dilemma and completed the job on the other party's behalf. Is there anything else? Zhang Xian asked. Young Master Lu Chong should be waking up in the next few days. Other than that, the only important matter left would be the master-teacher tournament. Sun Chang was just about to continue speaking when an impassive voice suddenly rang from the outside. Hongyuan Tier, 1 Empire Master Teacher Pavilion's Pavilion Master, 6-star Pinnacle Master Teacher Mo Gaoyuan, seeks an audience with Yang Shi. Chapter 570, Yang Shi's Disappointment, 6-star Master Teacher. Zhang Xian's eyebrows twitched, shocked by the sudden appearance of Pavilion Master Mo wasn't the most formidable master teacher in Myriad Kingdom Alliance only at 4-star Pinnacle. Where in the world did this 6-star Pinnacle Master Teacher come from? The fundamental requirement of becoming a 6-star Master Teacher was a cultivation realm of transcendent mortal 9 Dan, and a 6-star Pinnacle Master Teacher was probably a true saint. For a saint to actually seek his audience, just the thought of it left Zhang Xian's hair standing on ends. Even acting before a half 5-star Master Teacher was stressful enough for him. There wasn't a single moment throughout the incident which he didn't fear that the other party would see through his disguise. And yet, to do so before a true saint for pretending to a high-rank master teacher and scaring others with a false identity, that was a breach of the master teacher moral code. The other party would reserve all rights to kill him on the spot. In other words, the moment he was exposed as a fake, that would be the moment he would breathe his last breath. The news of Yang Shi's appearance must have leaked out. Zhang Xian rubbed his glabella in dismay. Given that such a formidable master teacher had run over to seek an audience with Yang Shi, that could only mean one possibility: the matter that had happened that day had reached the ears of Hongyuan Tier, 1 Empire. If Zhang Xian was a little stronger, he would at least be more confident in his disguise. But the choice wasn't up to him now. The other party was already at his doorstep, he couldn't possibly turn the other party away at this point. What to do? No, I should tell the other party that my teacher isn't around. Gritting his teeth, Zhang Xian was just about to instruct Sun Chang to relay those words, when the person beside him bellowed, "What are you making such a fuss about? Are you trying to show off your loud voice? Don't you know the basic manners to visiting another? Wait at the doorstep first, I'll report this matter to the old master." Zhang Xian turned his face stiffly around, only to see Sun Chang with a disdainful expression on his face. Sun Chang, noticing that the young master's gaze was on him, said contemptuously, "Who does he think he is? So what if he's a 6-star Pinnacle Master Teacher? Does he think that he's the only one who can transmit his voice telepathically? Even a 7-star Pinnacle Master Teacher would have to wait obediently at the entrance for the old master to summon him in. To cause such a huge fuss, is he trying to start a revolt?" Put on. Zhang Xian's body suddenly felt weak. In that instant, he even forgot to breathe and nearly died of suffocation. He was still worried over how he should deal with the 6-star Master Teacher outside when the fellow beside him uttered such words. It was too late for him to make excuses now. No matter what, the other party was a 6-star Pinnacle Master Teacher, a person standing at the very tip of the pyramid known as a Tier 1 Empire. To actually bellow at such a figure like that, sparing him no pride at all. "Brother Chang, you are about to break through the atmosphere." While tears were streaming down Zhang Xian's face, Sun Chang looked at him expectantly and asked, young master, wasn't the old master discussing the issue regarding young master Lu Cheng with you? Lu Cheng's soul was simply too strong. Even though Zhang Xian had successfully awakened him back then, the other party still needed some time for his soul to fuse properly with his body before he would be able to regain consciousness. However, after half a month of conditioning, it should be about time for him to regain consciousness. Hearing the question, Zhang Xian was stumped. He had once told Wang Ying that he was discussing with Yang Shi on how they could save Lu Cheng. Given that Lu Cheng was about to wake up already, it was indeed weird how not a trace of Yang Shi could be seen. Is he in the room? I'll go and ask him whether he wants to meet this 6-star master teacher or not. Seeing that there was no response from the young master, Sun Chang continued. Knowing that it would be impossible for him to reply Sun Chang's questions, Zhang Xian hurriedly interjected, cough cough, there's no need for it. I'll go ask him myself. For the time being, you should bring Pavilion Master Mo into the main hall. All right. Nodding his head, Sun Chang headed to the entrance to invite the other party in. Seeing the other party leave, Zhang Xian walked toward one of the rooms in the residence while rubbing his glabella. After that fellow's intervention, there was no choice but for Yang Shi to appear already. But after giving it some thoughts, this matter would be inevitable even if Sun Chang hadn't said anything. After all, given that the other party had made the journey here from afar, it was indeed dubious if Yang Shi didn't appear. Besides, it was likely that Pavilion Master Mo would return again after failing to meet him this once. In the end, he was just meeting the other party earlier. But how should he disguise himself before a 6-star pinnacle master teacher to convince him? An expert of that level was likely to have already forged the eye of insight, allowing him to see through all falsehood. He might have been able to pass off as a saint by utilizing Mo Huanqing's aura, but if he were to do the same for Pavilion Master Mo as well, he would surely be exposed instantaneously. The same goes for flight as well. Given that 4-star and 5-star master teachers hadn't come into contact with the ability of flight yet, Zhang Xian was still able to hoodwink them. To do the same with a saint was completely impossible. There was a fundamental difference between flight induced by a battle technique and the ability of flight that saints possessed. Since nothing works at all, why don't I just abandon all disguise? After walking around the room in dilemma, Zhang Xian suddenly came to a halt. Since neither his aura nor flight would work, he might as well not disguise himself. Having made up his mind, Zhang Xian quickly changed into Yang Shi's clothes and walked into the main hall. Mo Gaoyuan was seated on the guest seat in the main hall, and Mo Chen and Heng Qian stood obediently behind him. Upon arriving at Myriad Kingdom City, Missouri Gaoyuan immediately rushed to look for Heng Qian to better understand the affairs that happened that day. When he heard that Yang Shi came from the skies, induced a breakthrough in the demon Sync beast with just a surge of Xinqi, and conducted a soul impartation, he was filled with shock. Wishing to ascertain this matter personally, he brought the both of them along with him to pay Yang Shi a visit. Mo Gaoyuan scanned the surroundings and a frown slowly etched on his forehead. The layout of the residence was ordinary, resembling not the residence of a high-rank master teacher in the least. More importantly, the spiritual energy in the room was sparse just like anywhere else. The living quarters of an 8-star master teacher, even without setting up any formation, due to his overwhelming cultivation in itself, could turn a barren plain into a lush field. Powerful master teachers were aligned with nature, and they would naturally generate a spiritual energy force field that would nourish their environment wherever they went. It was precisely due to that reason that the top headquarters of the Master Teacher Pavilion was so concentrated in spiritual energy that even the most ordinary of cultivators would gain the speed of cultivation comparable to the greatest of talents there. And yet, the residence before him showed no such signs. It was nothing more than an ordinary residence. What was going on? Just when he was perplexed, a middle-aged man walked into the room. That middle-aged man had light footsteps, and not the slightest Xinqi disturbance could be felt from him. No matter how one looked at him, he was nothing more than an ordinary human. In fact, one couldn't be blamed if one were to assume that he was a cleaner of the residence. Just as Mo Gaoyuan was about to ask who was that fellow, Butler's son hurriedly walked forward and greeted, "Old master." Beside him, Hung She's body also jolted slightly, and the latter hurriedly sent him a telepathic message, "Pavilion Master Gao, this is Yang Shi, him?" Mo Gaoyuan was stunned. He had never seen an 8-star master teacher before, but he had seen a 7-star master teacher in the past. Every single movement from a 7-star master teacher seemed to be harmonized with nature, and it exerted an immense pressure on one, but the person before him truly felt no different from an ordinary man 8-star master teacher. "Are you mistaken?" Frowning, he glanced at Hung Shi, only to see the latter nod his head to confirm his suspicions. Only then did Mo Gaoyuan stand up and clasp his fists. "Hung Yuan Tier, 1 Empire Master Teacher Pavilion's Pavilion Master, 6-star Pinnacle Master Teacher." Mo Gaoyuan pays respect to Yang Shi. After which, he silently observed the other party carefully. Yang Shi remained nonchalantly after hearing the other party's title. Instead, he simply turned around and walked on the main seat before turning to look at Mo Gaoyuan nonchalantly. "What is the reason for your visit?" Not expecting the other party to ask him such a direct question, Mo Gaoyuan was tongue-tied. After all, he couldn't possibly say that he was unable to find the other party's name on the master teacher registry, so he came to verify whether the other party was a fake. "I heard that Yang Shi has come to the Myriad Kingdom Alliance, and fearing that our reception might be lacking, I decided to come over to take a look," Mo Gaoyuan replied awkwardly. But before he could finish his words, the middle-aged man's impassive voice sounded, "Are you done looking?" Yes." "Then you may leave now." After which, Yang Shi stood up, placed his hands behind his back, and started walking out of the room. Mo Gaoyuan's lips twitched. What is going on? Can't we at least converse properly? Even if you're an 8-star master teacher, surely there's no need for you to act so high and mighty. "No matter what, I'm still a pavilion master of Hung Yuan Tier, 1 Empire, and I came down specially to pay my respects. Yet, to throw me out like that, aren't you being too impolite?" "To tell Yang Shi the truth, I've been facing some problems in my cultivation recently and I would like to consult Yang Shi on them." Gritting his teeth, Mo Gaoyuan stood up. He came all the way here from afar, and he couldn't possibly leave just like that. Since that was the case, he might as well pose a question to the other party. If the other party could easily solve a question that was even beyond him, then there was no doubt about the other party's rank. On the other hand, if the other party was unable to answer the question, then his position as an 8-star master teacher would indeed be doubtful. Without turning his head, Yang Shi spoke impassively, "Speak." "Yes, it's a problem regarding the cultivation of Saint One Dan," Mo Gaoyuan hurriedly said. "Saint One Dan." Zhang Xian, disguised a Yang Shi, nearly keeled over. "I can explain the cultivation of transcendent mortal 1 Dan, 2 Dan, and 3 Dan to you perfectly, but Saint." He had only heard of the name of this cultivation realm just recently, so how could he possibly know the slightest thing about the cultivation of an expert of this level? Putting aside offering pointer, he hadn't even read books of such a level. He would surely expose his ignorance the moment he starts to speak on the matter. Not knowing of the dilemma in Yang Shi's mind, Mo Gaoyuan revealed his dilemma. How can one open the Zhukong acupoint without causing one's Jinqi to leak out while maintaining a consistent rise in one's cultivation? This question had confused him for a very long time. He'd had to browse through innumerable books before he was able to find the answer. If the other party was able to provide the same answer as him, that would prove that the other party was a high-rank master teacher. Or else the other party's background would be worth looking into. "May I know if Yang Shi has any solution to the matter?" After posing his question, Mo Gaoyuan looked at Yang Shi expectantly. "Zhukong acupoint? Jinqi leaking out? Maintaining a consistent rise in one's cultivation?" A mini-explosion occurred into Zhang Xian's head, and he nearly spurted blood. He had never even heard of this acupoint before, so how could he possibly know anything about Jinqi leaking out and what consistent rise in cultivation? Offering a solution to the problem was even beyond his means. He was doomed. Yang Shi, a moment had passed, but Yang Shi still remained silent. Perplexed, Mo Gaoyuan called him questioningly when a cold harumph suddenly sounded in the room. Are you really a 6-star pinnacle master teacher? Yang Shi turned to look at Mo Gaoyuan with a cold gaze filled with displeasure. That's right. Mo Gaoyuan was taken aback. He was the #1 expert in Hongyuan Tier 1 Empire, and everyone knew of his name. How could he possibly be a fake? That's right. Then why can't you even solve such a simple problem by yourself? With his hands behind his back, Yang Shi shook his head in disappointment. Seems like the standards for qualifying as a 6-star master teacher have dropped by a lot during the time that I've been away. Chapter 571, Yang Shi, I was wrong. Standards for qualifying as 6-star master teacher have dropped. You're saying that Mo Shi isn't qualified as a 6-star master teacher? Hung Qian and Mo Chen's body trembled violently. That was the strongest master teacher of Hongyuan Tier 1 Empire. To utter such words means to question the other party's professionalism. That was a huge insult in itself. As expected, upon hearing those words, Mo Gaoyuan frowned in displeasure. I passed the 6-star master teacher examination in Tianhong Conferred Empire, and it has been 37 years since then. In the time, I've groomed 2 6-star master teachers, 12 5-star master teachers, and countless 4-star and 3-star master teachers. On top of that, the Hongyuan Empire Master Teacher Pavilion has achieved the top 10 placing in the Master Teacher Tournament 3 times under me. How am I unqualified as a 6-star master teacher? I beseech Yang Shi to correct my errors. This was a matter concerning his professionalism and pride as a 6-star master teacher. Even if Yang Shi was a true 8-star master teacher, he couldn't and wouldn't back down. Those who seek to enlighten must be enlightened, those who seek to correct must be correct. Such is the way of a teacher. Challenged by the other party, Yang Shi retained his usual composure and said, if a teacher wishes to guide his student down the correct road, he must first ensure that he is on the right path. If he is treading on the wrong path himself, then the higher his achievements, the greater damage he will cause. The slightest mistake in a teaching could lead to the greatest of difference. If even the teacher's understanding is wrong, then the more students he had, the further the wrong teachings would spread, and the greater the harm dealt. The question you have just raised can be considered to be one of the simpler ones already. If you can't even solve such a simple question yourself, it only goes to show that your understanding of cultivation is flawed. Under such circumstances, how can you possibly guide your students correctly? Yang Shi shook his head. All right. Show me your punching routine so that I can take a look. If I'm not mistaken, given how you are unable to solve such a simple question, you are already going down the wrong path already. Going down the wrong path? Mo Gaoyuan's face darkened. There was no one who could be happy to have such words spoke straight to him. Not to mention, Mo Gaoyuan knew the answer to that question, and he only wanted to test the other party. It doesn't matter to me if you're uninterested. Seeing Mo Gaoyuan's silence, the disappointment on Yang Shi's face deepened, and he shook his hands helplessly. Sun Cheng, send the guests off. Sure. Nodding his head, Sun Cheng walked up and said, this unqualified Mo Shi over here, I'll have to ask you to leave. We don't welcome you here. You, Mo Gaoyuan was already displeased from the very start. Yet, such an insignificant butler still dared to utter such sarcastic words to him. Infuriated, he nearly coughed out blood. As a suspected 8-star master teacher, I could still tolerate it when Yang Shi said something about me, but who do you think you are? Who knows how many lives it must have taken you to accumulate sufficient good fortune for the old master to offer you his pointers. All you have to do is to execute your punching routine, and yet, you are still hesitating. It's the first time I'm seeing such a foolish master teacher. And you claim to be a 6-star pinnacle master teacher. The disdain on Sun Chang's face couldn't be any clearer. Pui. Huang Dang. Hong Qian and Mo Chen only felt their vision turning dark, and they nearly fainted on the spot. Big brother, do you know how respected the person before you is? To dare to speak to him like that, he is a person who is the closest to becoming a 7-star master teacher, the #1 expert of Hongyuan Empire. Even the emperor had to greet him in the capacity of a student upon seeing him, yet a mere transcendent mortal, one Dan fatty like you, actually dared to utter such disdainful words at him. Pooey, your head. Do you think you are qualified to do so? You. While the duo was frenzied, Mo Gaoyuan nearly fainted on the spot. In the past 37 years of his life as a 6-star master teacher, there hadn't been a single person who dared to utter such arrogant words before him. Yet, today, his professionalism was first brought into question, and now, he was being looked down upon. On top of that, the one who looked down on him was a mere subordinate. His face was as black as the bottom of a pot. Mo Gaoyuan suppressed his rage and said, Yang Shi, it just happens that there's one battle technique that I've been unable to decipher, so I hope that you can enlighten me on my faults. Even though he was infuriated by the actions of the fatty, he was still Yang Shi's subordinate, so it wasn't appropriate for him to lash out at him. Thus, he decided to first test the depths of Yang Shi's capability before deciding on his next course of action. And thus, before the other party could reply, he began executing his battle technique. As expected of a saint. As soon as he made a move, an overwhelming might immediately shrouded the entire room. It felt as though everyone was locked in a cage in the other party's grasp, and there was nowhere to escape to. Escaping from a saint was impossible for them. To seal even space with a single fist fearsome. After taking a glance at the other party's battle technique, a book immediately appeared in the Library of Heaven's Path, and Yang Shi immediately immersed his consciousness in to take a look. After affirming that the book was on Mo Gaoyuan, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. He couldn't help but send Sun Chang a look of commendation. To be able to even agitate a 6-star pinnacle master teacher, this fellow was indeed extraordinary. Who? Mo Gaoyuan soon came to a halt. Clasping his fist, he said, Yang Shi, I seek for your guidance. Raising his eyelids, Yang Shi walked over and said, You have practiced your dual nascent dragon Helios punch well in the past 20 years, having reached minor accomplishment in the battle technique. Mo Gaoyuan was taken aback. While there weren't many people who cultivated the dual nascent dragon Helios punch, it wasn't really an uncommon technique, so it wasn't surprising that Yang Shi would recognize it. But how did the other party manage to accurately guess how long he had practiced the technique for? After all, there were some talented people who were able to reach minor accomplishment within 3 days of practice, while there were some who could never get past novice despite devoting their entire lives to the technique. Given that Mo Gaoyuan was still a long way away from achieving major accomplishment, most people would have guessed that he hadn't practiced this technique for too long yet. The other party was able to guess that he had immersed himself in it for 20 years already. The other party's eye of discernment was simply way too formidable. Shocked, Mo Gaoyuan's attitude gradually became respectful. Yang Shi is right. It has been 20 years and 1 month since I first practiced this technique. Knowing that the other party would reply in such a manner, Yang Shi wasn't surprised at all. He gazed at the other party impassively and asked, Do you know the reason why you've only reached minor accomplishment in this technique despite practicing it more 20 years? I don't know. Mo Gaoyuan shook his head. He was able to easily reach major accomplishment for all other techniques. This was the only battle technique that he had a problem with. He had looked through many books, but he was still unable to understand the reason why. That was why he intentionally chose to execute this battle technique so as to pose this question to the other party. The essence of the dual nascent dragon Helios punch lies not in dragon Helios but dual nascent. Seeing the incomprehension in Mo Gaoyuan's eyes, Yang Shi continued, as the saying goes, fist for the young, stick for the veteran. For a fist technique to be strong, strength is just one factor. More importantly, one must possess vitality as well. The idea of dual nascent behind the dual nascent dragon Helios punch refers to one's body and one's heart. If you were only 100 or so when you first cultivated this fist technique, it wouldn't have taken you too long to reach major accomplishment. However, it's a pity that you only started when you were 120. Given that you have already aged, and the vitality in your aura is lacking, it's difficult for you to execute a fist technique meant for youths. But of course, you can still make up for the deficiency with a young spirit. Through your deep understanding of battle techniques, it wouldn't be too difficult for you to reach major accomplishment within 20 years, but it's a pity that a fault occurred while you were striving for Void Pursuit Realm, causing a trauma in your mind, resulting in your inability to comprehend the true essence of battle techniques. Trauma when striving for Void Pursuit Realm. How did you know about it? Shocked, Mo Gaoyuan was unable to retain his composure. Saint One Dan Void Pursuit Realm. It represented the will of one to pursuing the essence of space. At this realm, one would gain the ability to soar freely in the sky. How did you know? Yang Shi chuckled lightly. The dual nascent dragon helical punch, despite being known as a fist technique, is actually a technique that, through a firm footing on the ground, channels the strength throughout one's body into one's fist. Formidable fist technique tapped into the strength of one's entire body instead of just one's arms. Upon hearing this, Mo Gaoyuan, as well as Heng Qian and Mo Chen, nodded their heads in agreement. Yang Shi continued, but when you launched your fist, your aura was a little unstable. Even though it looked as though you utilized the strength of your entire body, in truth, you only channeled the strength from your ankles upward, excluding your feet. The feet are where the Zhukang acupoint is located, and considering the problem you just asked, it isn't too hard to deduce that you've met with some problem in your breakthrough to Void Pursuit Realm. It was just a moment ago that Mo Gaoyuan asked, how can one open the Zhukang acupoint without causing one's Jinqi to leak out while maintaining a consistent rise in one's cultivation, for the Jinqi to bypass the feet, where the Zhukang acupoint is located, and taking into account the previous question Mo Gaoyuan asked, it wasn't too difficult to deduce the situation. The problem in your cultivation caused your Jinqi to leak from your Zhukang acupoint, thus making it difficult for you to raise your cultivation. As such, you intentionally had your Jinqi bypass your feet when practicing the dual nascent dragon Helios punch, even though you managed to solve your problem eventually, thus allowing your cultivation to improve once more. It's a pity that the habit of avoiding your Zhukang acupoint for your battle techniques has already become deeply ingrained into you over the years, causing your progress in the dual nascent dragon Helios punch to stagnate. Yang Shi said. This Mo Gaoyuan's body stiffened, and he fell silent. The other party's words were spot on. Back then, when he was attempting a breakthrough to Void Pursuit Realm, he accidentally made a mistake, resulting in a fault in his acupoint which caused his Jinqi to leak out. It was only after many years of studying that he managed to find a solution to his problem, and this dual nascent dragon Helios punch happened to be a battle technique he cultivated before then. Mo Gaoyuan was certain that this was his first time meeting Yang Shi, and yet, the other party was able to deduce his condition just by looking at his battle technique. How formidable must his eye of discernment be? At the very least, he knew that he wasn't capable of such a feat. In fact, even the 7-star master teacher he met back then wouldn't be able to do the same too. Could the other party really be an 8-star master teacher? He had come harboring doubts about the identity of the middle-aged man, but now, he was already 70 to 80% convinced. While Mo Gaoyuan was still in shock, Yang Shi's voice continued, also, if my eyes don't fail me, you must have met with some kind of danger or were in the midst of a fight when you were attempting a breakthrough to the Void Pursuit Realm. Yes, Mo Gaoyuan nodded. Back then, he was chased by his enemies, and at that crucial moment, he had no choice but to attempt a breakthrough to Void Pursuit Realm to resolve the situation. Even though his breakthrough succeeded, and he managed to slay his enemies with his heightened strength, the forceful breakthrough had resulted in his Zhukang acupoint being damaged, thus resulting in a whole series of problems. As 6-star master teacher, you should have known that achieving a breakthrough to Void Pursuit Realm requires absolute tranquility, and one has to slowly nourish the Zhukang realm with one's Jinqi, and yet, you allowed yourself to be put into such a dangerous situation, leaving yourself no choice but to attempt such a dangerous breakthrough. You failed to assess your enemies accurately, and you failed to assess yourself accurately as well. Is this a mistake that a high-rank master teacher should make? Saying that you are unqualified is already downplaying the matter. Why? Do you have any objections to what I said? Or rather, with a slight frown, a majestic aura suddenly burst forth from Yang Shi. Do you still think that I am a fake? With a reddened face, Mo Gaoyuan panicked. I'm sorry, Yang Shi. I was wrong. Chapter 572, Lu Chong awakens. It was true that he visited with the intention of testing the other party. Having his intentions pointed out so directly left him in an incredibly awkward position. For him to actually doubt the identity of such a formidable master teacher, it was fortunate that the other party had a good temper. Otherwise, if the other party were too offended by this matter, even the destruction of the entire Hongyuan Empire wouldn't be sufficient to placate his wrath. Mountains of corpses and rivers of blood would be left in his wake. Pavilion Master Mo admitted his mistake. Does this mean that what Yang Shi said was true? Hong Qian and Mo Chen glanced at one another in shock. To be able to deduce this far through a mere punching routine, Yang Shi's eye of discernment was nothing short of terrifying. In other words, there was little doubt that he was a bona fide 8-star master teacher. The moment such a thought surfaced in their minds, a jolt ran through their bodies. Putting aside the other party's esteemed ranking, just his cultivation as an 8-star master teacher made him a fearsome adversary that few would dare to cross the line with. The might he possessed was so powerful that it would leave any opponent in despair. When Yang Shi first appeared, I was baffled by the lack of a powerful disposition that any experts should harness. It was as if he was an ordinary human. But thinking about it now, only a master teacher of Yang Shi's level would be capable of concealing his cultivation so thoroughly that not even Pavilion Master Mo is capable of peering through his facade. Most choose to use their strength as a tool to win the deference of others. Only a person standing at the very top, having seen through the illusion of glory and prestige, would be willing to humble himself as an ordinary person. Harboring such thoughts in mind, their respect for Yang Shi deepened. There were no experts they knew of that could compare to the middle-aged man standing before them. To view prestige and glory as nothing more than dirt, to remain humble despite being one of the strongest experts on the continent, and that charming confidence and astounding composure, these were qualities that too few possessed. From the start to the end, the other party never tried to leverage his superior cultivation against them, a common move used to instill respect and fear. Throughout the entire encounter, he remained nothing more than an ordinary person. Thinking about how they had acted as compared to the other party, they felt deeply ashamed of themselves. It was no wonder why the butler would act so arrogantly. To the butler of an 8-star master teacher, a 6-star master teacher was indeed not any different from an ordinary person. In fact, the cultivation they perceived in him might even be fake. There was a good chance that he wasn't just a mere transcendent mortal one-dan cultivator. After all, how could an 8-star master teacher, a saint expert, possibly regard a weakling so highly as to allow the other party to serve by his side? As this thought came to mind, cold sweat drenched their backs. It was lucky that they had maintained their etiquette before this butler Sunday. If they had really attempted to make a move against him, who knew what would remain of them now? There's no need to apologize. It is only right for master teachers to question everything around them. There are those who pass off as high-rank master teachers to deceive others for their own profits, and it is imperative for us to investigate such matters to prevent such frauds from sullying the name of the master teacher pavilion. Yang Shi didn't seem to have any intention of pursuing Mo Gaoyuan's faults. Instead, with a deep tone, he lectured the other within the capacity as an elder. I've benefited from Yang Shi's guidance. Mo Gaoyuan quickly stood up and clasped his fist. All right, you may leave now. I don't want anyone to learn of my presence here. You should know what to do. Yang Shi waved his hands. Yes. Mo Gaoyuan nodded before retreating from the room with a bent back. Hong Qian and Mo Chen hurriedly followed suit. Only after leaving the residence did the tenseness finally leave their bodies. Glancing at one another, they subconsciously wiped the cold sweat off their foreheads. Yang Shi didn't fly into a tantrum or suppress them with his cultivation in the encounter. However, his clear eyes made them feel extremely uncomfortable. Those deep eyes seemed to peer right at their souls, and it felt like no disguise or facade could possibly fool those eyes. Before the other party, they felt stark naked. It took a moment before they finally regained their composure. Mo Chen turned to Mo Gaoyuan and asked, "Teacher, what should we do now?" "Let's return." Mo Gaoyuan waved his hands. "Return?" Mo Chen was taken aback. They had taken nearly half a month to get here, and yet, just after trading some words with Yang Shi, they were leaving already? Wasn't this a little too fast? Since we've already achieved our aim here, what other reasons do we have to remain here? Mo Gaoyuan shook his head. Become a nuisance? This Mo Chen was tongue-tied. Indeed, their aim here was to confirm Yang Shi's identity, and since they had already achieved what they were here for, remaining here would only incur his displeasure. Since that was the case, they might as well leave immediately. Hearing that they were about to leave, Heng Qian clasped his fist and asked, "The Master-Teacher Tournament is going to commence tomorrow. Since Pavilion Master Mo and Mo Shi are here, won't you remain here to host the event?" If the both of them could host the event, the prestige of the tournament would immediately shoot up several levels. This could also boost the reputation of Huanyu Empire as a whole. "We'll decline on the offer. Since that is a matter of Huanyu Empire, we shall not get involved in it." Mo Gaoyuan shook his head. Huanyu Empire was a Tier 2 empire under Hongyuan Empire. There might be several troublesome implications if he were to disregard his identity and host the event. To tell the truth, Yang Shi's direct disciple, Zhang Shi, will be participating in the tournament as well, Heng Qian added in hopes of persuading the other party. Yang Shi's direct disciple. Mo Gaoyuan frowned. But soon, he shook his head once more and replied, "I'll still have to pass. It wouldn't be good for him to get involved in the affairs of a branch." His prestigious identity as the Pavilion Master of the Hongyuan Empire Master-Teacher Pavilion meant that even the slightest action and gesture of his could have political implications, so it was imperative for him to act with caution. "But still, since Zhang Shi is participating, allow me to up the stakes." Mo Gaoyuan flicked his wrist, and a jade box appeared in his hands. With a light chuckle, he said, "This is a high-tier spirit stone. I shall leave this with you as the prize for the champion of the tournament." A high-tier spirit stone. Heng Qian's breathing hastened. One high-tier spirit stone was worth 10,000 middle-tier spirit stone. High-tier spirit stones were an important cultivation resource even to a saint. Heng Qian had never even seen one before, and yet, Pavilion Master Mo was actually offering it as the prize for the tournament. He couldn't help but feel agitated by the matter. Clearly, Yang Shi is trying to temper his student through having him participate in this tournament. Since that's the case, I should help to fan the flames through stimulating the motivation of the other competitors. Let's see how this Zhang Shi will fare in the tournament this way. Mo Gaoyuan chuckled. Since Yang Shi wanted to put his student to the test, Mo Gaoyuan decided to lend him a hand. High-tier spirit stones may mean nothing much to a high-rank master teacher like Yang Shi, but to the master teachers from the regions surrounding Huanyu Empire, it was truly a priceless treasure. Offering this as the reward for the champion would surely motivate the geniuses participating in the tournament to give it their all, and this would in turn serve as a trial to temper Zhang Shi. Yes. Understanding the intentions behind Pavilion Master Mo's actions, Heng Qian carefully kept the jade box. Host the tournament well. Inform me of the results of the tournament as soon as possible. Chuckling lightly, Mo Gaoyuan leaped onto the back of the Saint Beast with Mo Chen. Just as he was about to set off, he suddenly recalled something and turned around. "You would do well to bury the matter regarding Yang Shi's deep in your mind and never speak of it. Warn the various sects and empires participating in the Master-Teacher Tournament of this matter as well. If any of them dares to blab on this matter, I'll investigate the matter personally and crush them." His voice carried a sharp edge that induced goosebumps on one's skin. Since Yang Shi didn't want anyone to learn of his presence, there was a need to halt the flow of news sternly. Otherwise, if a mishap were to occur and the other party were to go on a rampage, no one would be able to stop him. "Yes." Hong Qian nodded. "Who?" After warning Hong Qian, the saint beast flapped its wings, and before long, the trio disappeared amidst the boundless sky. Mo Gaoyuan and the others left in trepidation, not knowing that Yang Shi had also heaved a sigh of relief and wiped the sweat off his forehead upon their departure. It was truly too tiring to put on an act before a 6-star master teacher. It was fortunate that the other party didn't utilize or hadn't comprehended the eye of insight yet. Otherwise, there was no doubt that Zhang Xian would have been exposed. I should be safe now. At the very least, the present crisis was over. By the time the other party realized that something was amiss, Zhang Xian should already be powerful enough to deal with the situation then. After this matter, there should be no one who would dare to trifle with him within this period of time. Heaving a sigh of relief, Zhang Xian was in the midst of contemplating his next course of action when an anxious voice sounded behind him. Lifting his gaze, he saw Wang Ying rushing into the main hall. "Grand Teacher, may I know where Zhang Laoshi is? I have something urgent I need to speak to him about." "What happened?" Zhang Xian frowned. Only Zhang Laoshi will be able to help me with this matter," Wang Ying replied. Even though there was a troubled look on her face, her eyes were still fixated on the grand teacher before her. She was 80% certain that Yang Shi and Zhang Shi were the same person. Thus, she intentionally came over at this timing and asked such a question. If Zhang Laoshi remained absent during this entire period of time, she would be able to affirm her conjecture. "Only I'll be able to help you with the matter." "Wang Ying, what matter is it for you to act so secretively?" Just as she was staring fixatedly at Yang Shi to gauge his reactions, an impassive voice suddenly sounded. Turning around, she saw Zhang Laoshi walking in from outside. The latter clasped his fist and greeted, "Teacher." Yang Shi nodded. This, Wang Ying widened her eyes, dumbstruck. What was going on? Yang Shi and Zhang Laoshi actually appeared together. But aren't they the same person? Otherwise, how could they possibly have identical marks on their lower jaws? Wang Ying was completely stunned. She was extremely confident in her conjecture, and the abrupt situation caught her off guard. For a moment, she was at a complete loss. "Wang Ying!" Zhang Laoshi called. Returning to her senses, Wang Ying's face reddened in embarrassment. It seemed like she was indeed overthinking the matter. Zhang Laoshi was Yang Shi's student, so how could the both of them possibly be the same person? Her eyes must have been playing tricks on her that day. Reporting to teacher and grand teacher, Lu Chong has awoken. Wang Ying awkwardly clasped her fist. It had been half a month since Zhang Laoshi had used the soul rouse grass to save Lu Chong. He's awake. Zhang Shi's eyes lit up. Yes. Wang Ying nodded her head. You should go over first, I'll hurry over after I'm done. Zhang Shi waved her hands. Yes. Wang Ying said before leaving the room. Her departure left Zhang Shi and Yang Shi staring at one another, and after a moment later, the both of them heaved a sigh of relief. He could tell that Wang Ying was still doubtful of his identity, and thus, he immediately summoned his clone over. With both Yang Shi and Zhang Shi appearing at the same place simultaneously, no matter how confident Wang Ying was of her conjecture previously, she would have no choice but to accept it. All right, you should return back to the room to rest first. I'll go take a look on Lu Chong. Zhang Xian waved his hands, gesturing for the clone return to the room. After ensuring that he was gone, he reverted back to his original appearance before walking over to Lu Chong's room. Teacher, as soon as he entered the room, a young man immediately rushed forward and kneeled before him. Who else could it be other than Lu Chong? Everything is fine as long as you're awake. Zhang Xian nodded his head. The other party had nearly died in order to save him. It was fortunate that the other party was fine now. Otherwise, Zhang Xian would surely blame himself for life. All of the efforts he had put into saving Lu Chong hadn't gone to vain. Your cultivation. Zhang Xian was just about to speak when he suddenly noticed Lu Chong's cultivation and froze. Chapter 573, Lu Chong's peculiarity. The cultivation of the young man before him was exactly the same as before Zongshe realm. At the same time, there wasn't the slightest soul energy to be felt within him. It was as if what Zhang Xian saw before in the other party's consciousness was just a dream. Something is wrong, Zhang Xian frowned. He had once dived into the other party's consciousness, and putting aside how the other party's consciousness extended far beyond where his eye could reach, the other party's soul was also as humongous as a mountain. A thought popped into Zhang Xian's mind. Is it because he hasn't drawn his soul out yet? The strength of one's soul couldn't be perceived that easily. Only when one's soul was drawn out could it be assessed. Harboring such thoughts in mind, Zhang Xian instructed, I'll impart you a soul cultivation technique. From now on, you should just focus on cultivating your soul. There's no need for you to cultivate your Jinqi anymore. Raising his hand, he placed a finger on the other party's glabella. Wang. A simplified version of Heaven's Path soul guiding formula appeared in Lu Chong's mind. Lu Chong's Zongshe realm cultivation wasn't built on Jinqi cultivation but the poison body he had cultivated through poison tempering. Physical body cultivation complemented soul cultivation more than Jinqi cultivation, and thus, Lu Chong would benefit more from this. Thank you, teacher. After swiftly browsing through the cultivation technique in his mind, Lu Chong turned to look at his teacher and clasped his fist in gratitude. Even though his soul had gone into dormancy, he was still able to perceive the happenings around him subconsciously through his senses. In other words, he was well aware of what his teacher had done for him ever since he'd gone into a coma. Fighting against a transcendent mortal realm expert in Xianyuan Kingdom despite being only at Jizuan realm, buying down the soulless metal humanoid and venturing into the dangerous soul oracle tomb, severing his soul to nurture the soul rouse grasp the favor that the other party had shown to him was so great that it would be impossible for him to repay it within this lifetime. Not only so, the other party even gave him such a valuable cultivation technique without any hesitation. Clenching his fists tightly in determination, Lu Chong thought, Teacher, don't worry. I'll cultivate diligently so as to not disappoint you. He used to be a willful and lively person, but after the tragedy that befell his clan, reticence overshadowed all of his traits. Rather than expressing his gratitude verbally, he would rather show it through his diligence and perseverance. After browsing through the cultivation technique manual twice and memorizing it entirely, Lu Chong exhaled deeply and sat down on the floor. Zhang Xian also sat by the side to guard him. A soul drawn out for the first time was extremely vulnerable. The slightest mistake could possibly cause one's soul to dissipate along with the wind. Back then, Zhang Xian had drawn his soul out in an underground tomb, and on top of that, he was also cultivating the complete version of the soul guiding formula. As such, he wasn't exposed to such vulnerability. However, the same couldn't be said for Lu Chong. Zhang Xian drew his soul and began observing Lu Chong's condition intently. Sometime later, Lu Chong's body swayed, and his eyes gleamed brightly. A silhouette sharing the same appearance as him struggled out of his body. He had succeeded in drawing his soul out. His soul seems to be weak. Zhang Xian frowned deeply. Despite having drawn out his soul, Lu Chong still wasn't as powerful as Zhang Xian thought he would be. Rather, just like any other cultivator drawing his soul out for the first time, his soul was extremely weak, and even the weakest gust of wind could easily dissipate it. What was going on? Given the size of the latter's consciousness and soul back then, how could his soul be so weak? Teacher. The world a soul perceives is very different from what one's eyes can see. Seeing a different world before him, Lu Chong was visibly excited. Your soul is still very weak, so try to suppress such intense emotions. Take this spirit stone and quickly cultivate to stabilize your soul. After throwing a middle-tier spirit stone to Lu Chong, Zhang Xian tapped his glabella once again, imparting him the Heaven's Path soul art. Not just wind, even intense emotions could induce instability in a nascent soul. Thus, it was best for Lu Chong to cultivate as quickly as possible to stabilize his condition. But in any case, given that Zhang Xian was guarding by the side, and there was sufficient cultivation techniques and middle-tier spirit stones to drive Lu Chong's condition, there shouldn't be any trouble at all. After all, these were much better than the conditions Zhang Xian had back then. Yes. Suppressing his emotions, Lu Chong's soul sat before the middle-tier spirit stone and began absorbing the spiritual energy contained within to cultivate. His cultivation speed isn't too fast either. Was I really mistaken? Zhang Xian scratched his head. The rate of Lu Chong's cultivation contradicted what Zhang Xian had seen in the other party's consciousness. If Lu Chong really possessed acquired soul physique, given his strong fundamentals, his cultivation would surely improve at an unimaginable speed. Even Zhang Xian might be left in the dust. But contrary to Zhang Xian's conjecture, there was nothing extraordinary about the latter's performance. Could it be that he was mistaken? Did Lu Chong not possess acquired soul physique? But if Zhang Xian was mistaken, why would Lu Chong's consciousness and soul be that huge? While thinking about these doubts, Zhang Xian noticed that Lu Chong's soul had already stabilized. Since the other party had already overcome the vulnerable period, there was no need for him to stand guard anymore. Thus, Zhang Xian left the room, looked for Mo Hunsheng, and raised his doubts with him. Even though Mo Hunsheng had already imparted his techniques to him, the other party's knowledge of souls still far surpassed his. After all, the latter was a 6-star soul oracle who had lived several 10,000 years. That I'm not too sure as well. Why don't I take a look after young Master Lu Chong is done with his cultivation? Mo Hunsheng wasn't too clear what was going on as well, so he could only shake his head uncertainly. It would be better if he could take a look personally so as to better understand the situation. Zhang Xian nodded his head before returning to his room. He had spent the entire night guarding Lu Chong for his cultivation, and the master-teacher tournament would commence that day. No matter what, Zhang Xian should make some preparations for it. While the prize of middle-tier spirit stones was no longer as attractive to him as before, it was still a good opportunity for him to strike out his reputation. Otherwise, it would be hard for him to advance further as a master-teacher. Walking into the room, Zhang Xian saw the clone cultivating by the side and said, "From today onward, you're called clone, and you shall address me as the main." The clone nodded his head. "I'll be participating in the master-teacher tournament soon, so you can't stay here anymore. Otherwise, if someone were to see you while cleaning up the room, it would be difficult for me to explain the matter." The residence they were currently staying at was offered by Zhao Feiwu, and there were attendants from the Alliance head residence here to tidy up the place. It was one thing if Zhang Xian was still at the residence, but if he was off participating in the master-teacher tournament and one of the attendants were to see another Zhang Xian here, wouldn't that person be scared to death? As for disguising himself as Yang Xian while the clone was capable of executing Heaven's Path disguise art, he didn't possess the library of Heaven's Path. That made it likely for him to give himself away if he were to meet high-rank master teachers. The clone had also considered this problem, and he replied, "I'll go into your storage ring then." "You can go into my storage ring?" Zhang Xian was stunned for a moment before a bitter smile appeared on his face. The space in the storage ring was a vacuum. If any being were to enter the premises, they would die swiftly. Putting aside transcendent mortals, even saints would be unable to survive under such conditions. However, his clone was different. The physical body of the clone was crafted from a god artifact, the 9 Hearts Lotus. Breathing wasn't required for its existence, flame and water couldn't impair it, swords and sabers couldn't wound it. It wasn't a problem for it to be placed in the storage ring. However, as Zhang Xian was too used to the concept of lifeforms cannot exist in the storage ring, he instinctively asked the question. "Store?" Knowing that the clone could enter his storage ring, Zhang Xian stretched out his hand and drew the clone into his storage ring. Who? The clone immediately entered the storage ring, disappearing from sight. Bringing his clone along with him would help him avoid many unnecessary problems. As for Yang Shi being absent from the residence, it would only be weird if a high-rank master teacher of the other party's caliber appeared frequently around the residence. Leaving his room, Zhang Xian headed for the main hall, where he saw Pavilion Master Kong, Ruohuan Gongzi, and a few other people waiting. At this moment, Ruohuan Gongzi had already reinforced his cultivation as a transcendent mortal for Dan Pinnacle sturdily. His eyes were filled with a brilliant energetic glow. On top of his cultivation, it seemed like his comprehension of master teachers as an occupation had deepened significantly. Upon seeing Zhang Xian, Pavilion Master Kong chuckled and gestured. The Master Teacher Tournament is a public event, and it will be conducted on the field outside the Alliance Head residence. Zhang Shi, let's proceed over. All right. Nodding, Zhang Xian was just about to leave when a figure suddenly stood in front of him. Senior, I'll accompany you. Say senior. Zhang Xian was taken aback. Turning around, he saw that garden owner Shui was in the room as well. At this very moment, garden owner Shui exuded a steady aura which reflected perfect harmony between her soul and her physical body. Clearly, she had broken through her bottleneck and reached Transcendent Mortal 5 Dan, Consonant Spirit Realm. It was only due to the impairment of her soul previously that she had been unable to progress any further from Clarifying Turbidity Realm Pinnacle. But half a month ago, Yang Shi imparted her a technique that could heal her impaired soul. Along with the strong foundation she had built up through the years, she successfully advanced to become a Consonant Spirit Realm expert. On top of that, one could vaguely sense that her cultivation had already reached Consonant Spirit Realm Primary Stage Pinnacle. All she was lacking now was an impetus to advance to Intermediate Stage. Zhang Xian was initially surprised by the rapid growth of the latter, but after thinking about it, he soon came to a realization. In order to treat her impaired soul, garden owner Shui had been spending the past few decades absorbing the spirit of the medicinal herbs in her herb field. Even though it wasn't able to heal her impaired soul, it didn't go to waste either. If Zhang Xian's conjecture wasn't off, there was a good chance that her cultivation would surge all the way to Consonant Spirit Realm Pinnacle within a short period of time. Indeed. Yang Shi has accepted me as his student, and given that you're his direct disciple, isn't it only right for me to address you as senior? Garden owner Shui clasped her fist. Ah, that's true. Only then did it hit Zhang Xian. That day, due to the urgent circumstances, he knew that there was a chance that his scare might not work. Thus, he accepted Shui Yao as his student and imparted her with a technique to resolve the issue of her impaired soul. Through doing so, he would be able to earn her gratitude. And fortunately, everything went according to plan. A golden page was formed out of her gratitude, and it was through this that Zhang Xian was able to smash sect leader Bai, thus successfully instilling fear into the others. It was on a whim that he decided to do so after all, there was no better solution then and he'd forgotten about the matter after that. He didn't really expect the other party to take it seriously. Given that garden owner Shui was Yang Shi's student and Zhang Xian was the direct disciple, given the higher ranking of direct disciples in the lineage, it was indeed right for her to address him as such. There won't be any danger in the Master Teacher Tournament, so you need not worry about it. It would be better if you stood guard here. Even though he knew that the other party was doing this out of goodwill, Zhang Xian waved his hands to turn her down. Given that the Master Teacher Tournament was an activity organized by the Master Teacher Pavilion, anyone who dares to cause trouble in it would be deemed as an enemy of the Master Teacher Tournament. There was no one who would dare to take such a risk. Thus, it was unlikely there would be any threat to Zhang Xian's safety. This, garden owner Shui hesitated. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Waving his hands, Zhang Xian followed behind Pavilion Master Kong and walked out of the main hall. Master Teacher Tournament, here I come.
Chapter 574, Prize of the Tournament. The reason why Zhang Xian had traveled all the way to the Myriad Kingdom Alliance was for this tournament. While the final prize was only 100 middle-tier spirit stones, it no longer possessed as much of an allure to him anymore with his newfound wealth. As long as he emerged as the champion, he would become highly regarded by the Master-Teacher Pavilion. With such, it would be easier for him to gain access to transcendent mortal Fordan cultivation techniques. Besides, his cultivation and capability had already reached a bottleneck in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. If he wanted to progress any further, he would need to venture into higher-tiered empires. The top 10 of this tournament will gain the chance to study at Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, and this was a good opportunity as well. Thus, Zhang Xian still bore some expectations for the Master-Teacher tournament. Zhang Shi, I've spent the last few days compiling a list of potential contenders for the top 10 places. You should take a look. Pavilion Master Kong handed a book over. He hadn't been idling about the past half a month either. He'd had his men investigate the other powers, and eventually, he managed to compile this list. With this list, the participants of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance would be able to prepare themselves. After all, like the saying goes, if you know your enemies and know yourself, you will not be imperiled in 100 battles. Thank you. Knowing that the other party had put in a lot of effort into the list, Zhang Xian nodded his head and casually flipped it open. The number 1 contender to look out for is Luo Xian, the direct disciple of sect leader Luo Huang of Fleeting Cloud Sect. 4-star Pinnacle Master Teacher. Transcendent Mortal Fordan Pinnacle. Supporting occupations, 4-star Physician, 4-star Formation Master. This fellow is actually the number 1 contender to look out for. A bizarre expression appeared on Zhang Xian's face. Zhang Xian remembered this fellow. Half a month ago, he used 150 middle-tier spirit stones to bargain with Yang Shi for sect leader Luo Huang's life. Based on what Sun Chong had said regarding the other party, it seemed like the other party had also nearly died from being crushed under the demon sink beast. This kind of fool was actually the number 1 contender for the champion's seat of the Master-Teacher tournament. Cough cough. Seeing Zhang Xian's bizarre gaze, Pavilion Master Kong immediately deduced what he was thinking about and coughed. Actually, Luo Xian isn't as bad as you think. He's extremely strong, and even if I were to go against him, it would be hard to tell who would emerge triumphant. After a moment of contemplation, Zhang Xian nodded his head in agreement. The demon sink beast possessed the dragon bloodline. It was normal for cultivators of the same cultivation level to be unable to match up to it. By no means should one judge Luo Xian's strength through that encounter. And of course, when Zhang Xian met the latter in the capacity as Yang Shi, given how even half 5-star master teachers dared not utter a single word of dissonance, naturally, a 4-star pinnacle master teacher like him wouldn't dare to get ahead of himself. So, in truth, Luo Xian was still quite a fearsome adversary to face. At the very least, there were very few cultivators at Transcendent Mortal Fordan Pinnacle who would be a match for him. But of course, even though he is placed number 1 in the contenders to look out for in the tournament, the truth is that the capabilities of the top 10 on the list are around the same level. It'll be hard to say for sure who would be in the first place. Pavilion Master Kong continued. Noting that, Zhang Xian continued looking through the list. And just as Pavilion Master Kong said, there really wasn't much disparity in the capabilities of the top 10. They were all 4-star Master Teacher, Clarifying Turbidity Realm Pinnacle experts.
Given that they possessed similar cultivation realms and Master Teacher ranking, it would be impossible to tell who was above whom. It didn't take long for Zhang Xian to finish browsing through the book. Of the 28 powers, a total of 56 participants had been elected, and even the weakest of them was a 4-star primary master teacher. In other words, Zhang Xian was the weakest of the lot. And considering how Ruohuan Gongzi was the only 4-star master teacher back in the selection rounds, it was no wonder why the Myriad Kingdom Alliance was always placed in the lower rankings each tournament. Furthermore, only powers with talents who placed amongst the top in the tournament would be granted better resources, and it was through such resources that they would be able to groom even more formidable master teachers and vice versa. Thus, this formed both a virtuous cycle and a vicious cycle. It wouldn't be a mistake to say that if the Myriad Kingdom Alliance were to continue with its placing in the Master Teacher Tournament, it would be a matter of time before it was annexed by other powers, turning it into a mere name in history books. This was precisely the reason why every single power viewed the Master Teacher Tournament with utmost importance, not daring to let their guard down at all. Song Chao. As he browsed through the book once more, in the 25th rank, he saw a familiar name, Song Chao. He didn't expect the fellow whom he had beguiled for so many times to be placed so highly in the list of contenders. Digesting the information, Zhang Xian gained a good grasp of the various contenders in the tournament. Zhang Shi, your knowledge as a master teacher and in your supporting occupation is unmatched by any of the participants in the Master Teacher Tournament. Even though your cultivation is slightly lacking, as long as your luck is good, getting into the top 10 shouldn't be a problem at all. Pavilion Master consoled. Zhang Shi had accomplished extraordinary feats in the selection rounds, but before so many geniuses, his radiance became dim. Putting others aside, just his cultivation alone would pose a fatal weakness to him. It was just like the wooden planks making up a pail, only when all of them were long could one fill the pail with more water. As long as one of the wooden planks was short, it would be all for naught. Similarly, Master Teacher Tournament assessed one's overall strength. Even if one was proficient in everything except for one aspect, that single aspect would be exploited by one's competitors. Under such circumstances, it would be impossible for Zhang Xian to achieve an even higher placing than that. Knowing what Pavilion Master Kong was worried about, Zhang Xian asked, "Are the tests for the tournament decided yet?" Pavilion Master Kong pondered for a moment before replying. "It has already been decided, but we aren't privy to such information. The tests are decided solely by Hong Shi, and to uphold fairness, it was decided that he will announce the tests on the spot." Even Pavilion Master Kong wasn't entitled to the contents of the examination. Otherwise, there was a possibility that he could conduct special training for the Myriad Kingdom Alliance's participants to have them adapt to the conditions they would be subjected to in the tournament. If so, that would compromise the integrity of the tournament. In any case, given that it was Hong Shi hosting the event, as a 5-star master teacher and a master teacher of Hongfeng Empire, there was no need for anyone to worry about him siding with powers. Hongfeng Empire was a vassal empire directly under Huanyu Empire, and it was significantly stronger than Fleeting Cloud Sect, White Helios Sect, Myriad Kingdom Alliance, and powers of that level. Even among unranked empires, it was ranked at the forefront. Even though I'm not too sure what the tests will be, there has been some news on the prize recently. Pavilion Master Kang's eyes glowed in agitation. Prize? Isn't it 100 middle-tier spirit stones and the opportunity to study in Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy? Zhang Xian asked in bewilderment. Zhang Xian had heard of it from Su Shi back then, and there was nothing to be awed about. That was indeed the case back then, but the prize has been raised recently. The new prize is so high that even I can't help but feel moved. Pavilion Master Kong said excitedly. Last night, the heads of the various powers in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance received news from Hong Shi regarding the increase in the prize of the tournament. When he first set eyes on the information regarding the prize, despite being a top expert and the head of a master teacher pavilion, his breathing couldn't help but hasten, and his eyes widened uncontrollably in disbelief. He thought that the prize offered previously was already sufficiently generous, but compared to the new one it was nothing at all. It was as though an ant meeting an elephant. Oh. What is the new prize offered? Zhang Xian asked in interest. The one who is placed first in the tournament will receive a high-tier spirit stone. Pavilion Master Kong said. High-tier spirit stone? Wasn't it 100 middle-tier spirit stone? How did it turn into a high-tier spirit stone? As though fearing that Zhang Xian couldn't understand the value of a high-tier spirit stone, Pavilion Master Kong explained, a high-tier spirit stone has the value equivalent to 10,000 middle-tier spirit stone, and that's assuming that there's a person willing to sell it. Its value is unimaginable. 10,000 middle-tier spirit stones. Zhang Xian's breathing hastened as well. He had worked so hard, putting himself at grievous risk, only to extort 600 middle-tier spirit stones from the fleeting Cloud sect and 13 other powers. Yet, to think that being placed first in the tournament would earn him a high-tier spirit stone straight, this was way too exaggerated. Indeed. And on top of the opportunity to study at Hengyuan Master Teacher Academy, he will also be allowed to cultivate in Cleansing Lake for 3 days, Pavilion Master Kong continued. Cleansing Lake? What's that? Zhang Xian asked curiously. It's one of the greatest treasures of Huanyu Empire's royalty, as well as the greatest foundation behind its establishment. Unconcealable envy shone in Pavilion Master Kang's eyes as he said, cultivators who have managed to reach clarifying turbidity realm understand that turbid and clear also refers to one's physical body and soul respectively. The Cleansing Lake is a blessed land that nourishes one's soul. Cultivating there, one's soul would undergo a metamorphosis, thus increasing one's chance of achieving a breakthrough to consonant spirit realm significantly. If I were to get a chance to cultivate there for 3 days, the chances of me being able to reach consonant spirit realm would surely be more than 50%. However, the Cleansing Lake is one of the most precious resources of Huanyu Empire, and there are limited slots to its use. Only for the Master Teacher Tournament, which happens once every decade, are they willing to spare a few slots. Zhang Xian nodded his head calmly in response, but on the inside, he was astonished. To increase the chances of Pavilion Master Kong advancing to consonant spirit realm to more than 50%, that Cleansing Lake was indeed formidable. A high-tier spirit stone, the opportunity to study at Hengyuan Master Teacher Academy, and 3 days of cultivation in the Cleansing Lake. Honestly, just any single one of them was enough to send countless experts into frenzy. And yet, for the 3 of them to be the prize of the champion of the Master Teacher Pavilion, fearsome. What about the second place? Since the reward for the first place was so generous, what about the second place? The second pales a lot in comparison. It's 300 middle-tier spirit stones, the opportunity to study at Hengyuan Master Teacher Academy, and 2 days in the Cleansing Lake. Pavilion Master Kong replied. Even though it was just a single placing, the rewards had decreased by manifolds. Putting aside the reduction of a single day in Cleansing Lake, there was a difference of 30 times in value between a high-tier spirit stone and 300 middle-tier spirit stones. And the third place is 100 middle-tier spirit stone and 1 day in the Cleansing Lake. As for the 4th to 10th place, they won't be allowed to enter the Cleansing Lake, and they will only be given 10 middle-tier spirit stones each. But fortunately, all of them will be given the opportunity to study at Hengyuan Master Teacher Academy. Pavilion Master Kong recounted the rewards of the top 10 of the Master Teacher Tournament. Seems like I really must take the first place. Zhang Xian clenched his fists tightly. He was still thinking that it would suffice as long as he got into the top 10 in the tournament, but with the increased rewards his determination to obtain the first position was sparked. Putting aside everything else, just the high-tier spirit stone in itself was invaluable to him. With this, he could probably cultivate all the way to the pinnacle of the transcendent mortal without worrying about spirit stones. Hearing Zhang Xian's words, Pavilion Master Kong smiled bitterly. Indeed, it would be good to take the first place. However, how could it be so easy? There wasn't anyone who wasn't interested in the first place, especially with the increased reward. But considering the talented geniuses who would be participating in the tournament, it would be no easy feat. Yang Shi was a formidable master teacher, there were probably none who would dare to cross his path. However, Yang Shi's existence was only known amongst the top echelons of the 14 powers, the participants of the tournament were unaware of it. Thus, there would be no one who would go easy on Zhang Shi just because he was Yang Shi's student. Zhang Shi might be formidable in other aspects, but when it comes to a battle of cultivation, he stood little hope. Even though Pavilion Master Kong had entrusted his hopes to Zhang Shi, he didn't bear much expectation for the latter to take down the champion position. "We're here." Upon hearing Pavilion Master Kang's sigh, Zhang Xian was just about to speak, but Ruohuan Gongzi's voice sounded. Lifting his gaze, he realized that they had already arrived in the square in front of the Alliance head residence. At the current moment, the square was bustling with huge crowds. After so many days, the Master-Teacher tournament was finally going to begin. Chapter 575, Rules of the Tournament. Walking along the packed crowd, Zhang Xian saw a huge round stage placed at the center of the square. The top of the stage was veiled beneath a layer of fog, making it impossible to perceive what was hidden inside. Most likely, this should be a formation preventing anyone from peering into the contents inside. Countless master teachers, dressed in robes, were seated around the stage. Zhang Xian briefly scanned the surroundings with his gaze. As expected of the Master-Teacher tournament, there was a total of several thousand people from all 28 powers, including the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. Every single one had an emblem reflecting their respective ranks pinned on their chests, and reflected light glared from them. How many times in one's life could one see such a grand festival where several thousand master teachers were gathered together? It was no wonder why the citizens of Myriad Kingdom Alliance were so excited, camping at the square from such early hours. In order to prevent any accidents from occurring, the Alliance head residents had been making preparations from half a month ago. All of their elites were stationed around the area, ready to take any countermeasures should any unexpected situation occur. So, this is the Master-Teacher tournament. So many master teachers are gathered here. It's so difficult to meet even a single one of those lofty master teachers under normal circumstances, and yet, a few thousand of them were gathered here today. To be able to see so many formidable master teachers competing against one another, I would have no regrets even if I were to drop dead now. Such discussions were occurring throughout the crowd. Their excitement over the Master-Teacher tournament was apparent through their words and expressions. The Master-Teacher tournament only happened once every decade, and on top of that, the location where it would be hosted was randomly selected each time. Given that it was conducted in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance this time, there was no way they could miss the festival. In truth, the Master-Teacher tournament also had the intention of utilizing the fanfare behind the tournament to display the might of the Master Teachers as well as boost the popularity of this occupation and bring new blood into the organization. Look, it's Ruohuan Gongzi. He's so handsome. The person beside him must be Zhang Shi, right? I think so. I became his loyal fan after hearing of his affairs. Me too. Despite forfeiting the final test in the selection round, he was still able to take the top position. There is no one else in Myriad Kingdom Alliance who is capable of such a feat. Upon the arrival of the trio, someone exclaimed and a wave of cheering sounded from the crowd. Even though the selection round was conducted within the Master Teacher Hall, perhaps due to how astonishing those feats were, everyone in Myriad Kingdom City swiftly learned of the matter. A 4-star Master Teacher who wasn't even in his 20s yet, a person who, through his astounding capabilities, convinced the Physician Guild, Formation Master Guild, Beast Hall, and other supporting occupations to make an exception and allow for the promotion in his ranking. The candidate stood above Ruohuan Gongzi and the other geniuses in the selection rounds. Despite participating in only 4 of the tests, all 3 of these were legendary feats in themselves, and any one of them could easily won the admiration of the younger generation. Zhang Shi is so dashing. Dashing? Why does he look like a pervert to me instead? Pervert? Even if he's really a pervert, I'm still willing to marry him and bear his children. A few young ladies bucked up their courage and shouted loudly. Zhang Xian's astounding feats previously had captured their hearts. Pervert? Bear my children? Dark streaks filled Zhang Xian's face. What the heck was that? Seems like Zhang Shi's reputation has exceeded even that of mine. Pavilion Master Kong chuckled as he stroked his beard. Just 2 months ago, there was no one in Myriad Kingdom City, not even him, who had heard of Zhang Xian. And yet, at this very moment, his name was known in every single household throughout the capital. The master-teacher tournament was indeed capable of inducing a rapid surge in one's reputation. Right after Zhang Xian and the rest squeezed through the crowd and gathered together with the group from the Myriad Kingdom Alliance Master-Teacher Pavilion, a beautiful figure suddenly rushed up to him in agitation. "You're finally out of seclusion," it was the second princess of Myriad Kingdom Alliance, Zhao Feiwu. Ever since his return from Yinyang Lake, Zhang Xian had been in seclusion. For the past 2 months, he had hardly met anyone. At this moment, Zhao Feiwu was no longer disguised as a male. Instead, she wore a simple dress that brought out her lithe figure. She carried a majestic but warm disposition unique to princesses like her, and from afar, she looked no different from a fairy. Looking at the young lady before her, Zhang Xian nodded his head. It seemed that Zhao Feiwu had been cultivating in the past 2 months. Vaguely, he could sense that she had reached Fighter 6 Dan Pixue realm. To be able to improve so swiftly in such a short period of time, even though the immense pool of resources from the Alliance head residence played a part, she must possess superior talent as well. Zhang Shi. Jin Songhai, who was in charge of guarding her, stepped forward and greeted Zhang Xian. "Take a seat." After trading some pleasantries, the few of them sat down, and soon, from the top of the round stage in the center, an elder could be seen walking over. "This is 5-star Master Teacher Hong Shi, he's in charge of hosting this Master Teacher tournament." Pavilion Master Kang whispered to Zhang Xian telepathically. Zhang Xian shot a glance over to the elder on the stage. Hong Shi had a tall stature, and his hands and legs were extremely long. The aura he exuded seemed to be perfectly aligned with the surroundings, as though there was a giant bridge within his body connecting him to the environment, nourishing his body and soul with spiritual energy. Transcendent Mortal 6 Dan, Cosmos Bridge Realm. One of the basic requirements to becoming a 5-star master teacher was to achieve this level of cultivation. Cosmos Bridge Realm was signified by the presence of an intangible bridge within one's body that aligned one with the world. Even without cultivating consciously, spiritual energy would flow along the bridge to nourish one's body, resulting in a constant rise in one's cultivation. At such a realm, one's jinqi and soul would grow at a fearsome pace, and one would truly wield the strength to move mountains and fill oceans. To think that he's a formidable figure as well. Zhang Xian had met Hong Shi just yesterday, and standing behind him Hong Yuan, the other party looked no different from a timid quail. Thus, he didn't expect the other party to possess such an impressive cultivation level. In fact, given his current cultivation realm, even 10 of him wouldn't be a match for the other party. His jinqi was at Transcendent Mortal Realm 3 Dan Pinnacle, whereas his soul was at Transcendent Mortal 4 Dan Realm Pinnacle. In total, his strength added up to 2,600,000 ding, and it wouldn't be a problem even if his opponent was a Consonant Spirit Realm Intermediate Stage cultivator. But against a Cosmos Bridge Realm expert, he wouldn't even be able to retaliate. Even at primary stage, an expert of that caliber would possess a strength of 4 million ding. Putting aside their deep comprehension and control over the environment, just their immense strength posed a huge threat in itself. Everyone. Just as Zhang Xian was harboring such thoughts, Hong Shi suddenly stopped in his footsteps and spoke. His voice seemed to harness the roar of the thunders, and it resounded clearly in the surroundings. The entire square, consisting of several 10,000 people, immediately fell silent upon hearing his words. His words were spoken through impartation of heaven's will, thus inducing deference amongst the crowd. No one in the square dared to defy his words. "I am honored to be invited as the host of the once-in-decade Master Teacher Tournament." Waving his hands, Hong Shi glanced through the crowd. "I believe everyone should know the rewards for the tournament. In the interest of time, I'll skip the pleasantries and move on straight to the structure of the tournament and the rules behind it." Hearing those words, the crowd subconsciously held in the breath, fearing that they might miss a single word. There were at least several thousand ways to conduct the tests of the master-teacher tournament that they knew of, and thus, it was impossible to predict. Interested, Zhang Xian's eyes also fell on Hong Shi. He had always been curious how the master-teacher tournament could ensure fairness while avoiding harming the camaraderie among fellow master-teachers. As 4-star master-teachers, you have stepped into the ranks of an intermediate master-teacher, and there has been a significant rise in your standing. Naturally, this also means a greater responsibility towards enlightening the world, and your capability must be up to par to fulfill that responsibility. Soul depth, cultivation realm, knowledge impartation, understanding of cultivation, identification of flaws. I believe you have already undergone tests assessing you on those aspects in the selection rounds in your respective empires and sections. As such, it would be meaningless if I were to test you on those aspects as well, and it would be hard to assess your capabilities fully through such too. Hong Shi smiled as he looked at the participants of the tournament. But if the participants are not assessed on these, what would they be assessed on? Everyone was stunned. Those were the utmost fundamentals to master teachers, and as such, they were used as criteria to determine the capability of a master teacher. If they weren't competing on those aspects in the master teacher tournament, then what would they be competing on? Calm down, allow me to finish my words first. Seeing the doubt in everyone's eyes, Hong Shi continued, the tournament will consist of 2 main stages: preliminary selection and dueling round. There'll be 4 tests in the preliminary selection, and only the participants who clear all 4 tests will be qualified for the dueling round. Those who fail in any one of the tests will be eliminated from the tournament. Preliminary selection. Dueling round. A grim expression appeared on the faces of the crowd. They thought that the tournament would be similar to the selection round, where they were assessed on their soul depth, cultivation, and such. They didn't expect it to take on such a complicated structure. I'm sure everyone should understand what dueling is, so I won't elaborate on it. So, I'll just touch on the preliminary selection. Hong Shi continued, since you have been chosen as the representative of your power, you must be amongst the top of the younger generation, and there is a good chance that you might advance to become a 5-star master teacher or even higher one day. However, the higher ranked you are, the harder it is for you to advance. Talent isn't all there is to a master teacher, and strength is just one of the many factors you will need. Temperament, courage, wisdom, and intelligence, these are of utmost importance as well. Only with these can you surpass your peers and reach incredible heights in the future. Thus, I've designed 4 tests relating to each of these for the preliminary selection. Tests to assess temperament, courage, wisdom, and intelligence. How can such qualities be assessed? I've no idea too. But since Hong Shi is the one conducting the examination, there's no need to worry about the fairness of the tests. Indeed. With so many master teachers present here, it's impossible for him to be biased. I'm just curious as to how these intangible qualities can be assessed. After understanding the content for the examination, everyone was shocked. As master teachers, they had heard of tests on one's ability to impart knowledge and comprehension of a cultivation technique. Never in their lives had they heard of tests on one's temperament, courage, wisdom, and intelligence. After all, as intangible qualities, they couldn't be quantified and measured directly. Ignoring the commotion amidst the crowd, Hong Shi waved his hands and said, "All right, participants, proceed up the stage. Let's go up." Zhang Xian and Ruohuan Gongzi glanced at one another before standing up and walking up to the stage. The master teachers from other powers also advanced forward. They were all geniuses below their 30s, and the 4 stars on the emblems pinned before their chests reflected their talents and capabilities. Zhang Xian scanned the faces of the crowd proceeding up the stage, and with the exception of Luo Xian and Song Chao, he didn't recognize anyone else. The primary requirement for the Master Teacher Tournament is that participants mustn't exceed the age of 30. At the entrance to the stage, there is a crystal ball. Before coming in, touch the crystal ball, and based on the aura of your soul, it'll reflect your actual age. Hong Shi added. Zhang Xian glanced at the entrance of the round stage and saw a crystal ball exuding a warm glow being placed on top of a pedestal by the entrance. To uphold the integrity behind the master-teacher tournament, there were strict checks to prevent any unqualified personnel from participating in the tournament. This crystal ball could peer deep within one's soul. Just by touching it, it was able to accurately determine one's actual age. Chapter 576, Ghost Domain Illusory City. Through pills or unique techniques, cultivators could warp their appearances to make them look young. Sometimes, even high-rank master teacher would be unable to see through some of these disguises. On the other hand, a human's soul was forged at birth, and it would mature with the passing of time. There was no cultivation technique or means that could conceal one's soul age. Thus, using one's soul to assess one's age was viewed to be the fairest method, and no one voiced any complaints. Soon, all 56 participants had passed the crystal ball test. Most of them were between 28 and 29, and the oldest of them all was 29-year-old and 11 months. Naturally, the youngest of the lot was Zhang Xian. He was still 2 months away from reaching 20, and everyone couldn't help but be shocked upon seeing such a young participant. After all, the others were around a decade older than him. Considering his age, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was the most talented of all those gathered there. Why does the Myriad Kingdom Alliance seem to be regressing as time passes? Indeed. To have this child compete with us, it seems like they have given up all hope. They've placed last consecutively so many times. It's no wonder that they have already lost their confidence at this point. Many people expressed their disdain for the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. Despite Yang Shi driving away 14 of the strongest powers in the region single-handedly that day, the entire incident had been hushed, and all news regarding it had been suppressed. As such, most of the spectators and even the participating master teachers were unaware of the matter. The Myriad Kingdom Alliance had never achieved good results in the past, and upon seeing that they had sent in a lad who was a decade younger than the other participants, naturally, they thought that they had given up on the tournament. Since everyone fulfills the requirements, allow me to delve deeper into the details regarding the preliminary selection. Seeing that everyone had cleared the verification, Hong Shi chuckled. The first round, temperament. At this point, Hong Shi waved his hands. This is the Ghost Domain Illusory City that was left behind by 5-star master teacher Fei Yuzi. This artifact harnesses the concepts of Qi Men Dun Jia, and it is an extremely valuable treasure. Who? The vision before everyone blurred for an instant as the fog cleared for a corner of the stage, revealing a towering fortress. Red bricks, emerald roof, white walls, and green corridors. From afar, it exuded a sinister aura, sending a cold chill down one's spine. Ghost Domain Illusory City. What is that? I seem to remember seeing this in some book before. If I recall correctly, it is a unique treasure harnessing the concepts of Qi Men Dun Jia. As for what exactly it is or how the test will be carried out, I've no idea as well. Qi Men Dun Jia. What's that? It's an extremely rare, unique occupation. I heard that there isn't a single branch even in Huanyu Empire. Seeing a fortress appear amidst the fog, a huge commotion broke out. Even Pavilion Master Kong and the others couldn't help but frown in doubt. Despite their vast knowledge, they had never heard of it before. There is only one entrance and exit to the Ghost Domain Illusory City. In the temperament test, you will pass the test as long as you leave via the exit within an incense's time of passing through the entrance. Hong Shi chuckled as he revealed the rules. So simple. But we can only see the entrance. Where is the exit? I've no idea either. However, we should be able to find it after we go in. Upon hearing the simple rules behind the challenge, everyone was taken aback. Even Zhang Xian felt a little bewildered. All of them were 4-star master teachers who possessed superior eyes of discernment. Even if the Ghost Domain Illusory City possessed some kind of beguilement formation, it shouldn't be too difficult for them to overcome it. Since this was the preliminary selection for the Master Teacher Tournament, how could it be that easy? Do you think that the test is easy? Let me just tell you in advance, don't bank on luck. It isn't as easy as it seems. Noticing everyone's doubtful gazes, Hongshi chuckled. The ghost domain illusory city only allows one person to be on its premises at any time. Since there are a total of 56 people here, an order must be established. Since we've just verified everyone's ages, let's go by age, starting from the youngest, and so, the first to enter shall be Zhang Shi. Since Zhang Xian was the youngest, he would have to be the first one to enter under such an order. In truth, the reason why Hongshi made such an arrangement was to see how capable Yang Shi's direct disciple was as well. Me? Zhang Xian blinked his eyes in bewilderment. Hongshi nodded his heads. Allow Zhang Shi to go up first. Isn't that a little too reckless? Beneath the stage, Pavilion Master Kong, Elder Su, and the other elders of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance Master Teacher Pavilion glanced at one another as their mouths twitched. I don't think that it's a good idea, Elder Wu nodded his head in agreement. During the selection round back then, he had suffered greatly under Zhang Shi's hands. The latter's means were simply way too peculiar. To allow him to go up first, Hongshi, you are being incautious. This Hongshi, why don't I go first? Zhang Shi can go after everyone is done. Ruohuan Gongzi also swiftly came to a realization and stepped forward. What are you up to? Hongshi has already said that we'll go by age, are you trying to flout the rules? I advise you to just back out of the tournament. To cower right before a challenge, even if your Myriad Kingdom Alliance cares not for its reputation, please don't demean master teachers as an occupation. Isn't it a little too late to feel fear at this point? Hearing Ruohuan Gongzi's words, the other master teachers in the surroundings sneered coldly. The first one to enter tended to be at a disadvantage given that he wouldn't have any idea about what he could expect from the test. In their view, Zhang Xian had cowered at the last moment and thus, Ruohuan Gongzi tried to step forward in his place. Furthermore, upon thinking of the latter's age and cultivation, their disdain only served to further deepen. Don't worry, the test will be fair. It doesn't matter whether you are the first one to enter or the final one to enter. The Qi Men Dun Jia in the Ghost Domain Illusory City is constantly changing, and it won't repeat itself. The encounter of the first challenger will be of no analytical value to the rest. Thinking that Zhang Shi was worried about this issue, Hongshi chuckled. Also, the offensive mechanisms in the artifact will automatically come to a halt within an incense's time. Thus, regardless of your cultivation realm, there'll be no threat to your life. Don't worry, I can deal with it. Zhang Xian turned to Ruohuan Gongzi and reassured him. The Ghost Domain Illusory City sounded fearsome, but it did little to faze him. You should enter now. Hearing the lack of fear in Zhang Xian's voice, a hint of commendation flashed across Hongshi's face as he beckoned the latter in. Lifting his feet, Zhang Xian walked into the entrance of the castle. As Zhang Xian disappeared into the entrance, a bitter smile slowly formed on Ruohuan Gongzi's face. I don't doubt that you will be able to deal with it, what I fear is that the Ghost Domain Illusory City won't be able to deal with you. After the days he had spent with Zhang Xian, he had gained a deep understanding of that fellow. Even though he often looked confused, his incredible means could easily scare a person to death once he made a move. Putting aside Elder Wu, Elder Bai, and the others who nearly went insane after being tortured physically and mentally from him, just the experience in the Glacier Plain Court spoke tons about him. They were supposed to cultivate in the Yinyang Lake, but before they could even see the Yinyang Lake, he had already sapped the seed water dry. Common sense simply didn't seem to apply to him. This Ghost Domain Illusory City looked formidable, but Ruohuan Gongzi had little doubt that something could go awry given that Zhang Xian was involved. Let's just hope that my thoughts are wrong. Grabbing his heart, Ruohuan Gongzi thought. There's no need to worry. Given Zhang Shi's extraordinary strength, he won't be in danger. Seeing the awful look on Ruohuan Gongzi's face, Song Chao walked over to console. Failing to meet Zhang Xian the past few days, he often spent his time at the master-teacher pavilion, and at where, he became acquainted with Ruohuan Gongzi. Coming from similar backgrounds and having a common topic from their experiences in being wrecked by Zhang Shi, even though they were rivals, they couldn't help but feel a sense of connection to one another. Cough cough, I'm not worried that Zhang Shi would be in danger, but halfway through his words, Ruohuan Gongzi abruptly came to a halt. I hope that I'm just overthinking it. You're not worried that he will be in danger? What do you mean by that? It can't be that you're worried that the ghost domain illusory city will be in danger. Before Song Chao could respond, a young man not too far away flung his sleeves and sneered, "What a joke." The duo turned around, only to see a young man with thick eyebrows and high nose bridge. Ruohuan Gongzi recognized the other party. Frigid Gale Sex Liao Wuji. He is the second in ranking on the list of contenders to watch out for. Even though this young man's words were unpleasant to the ear, his capability wasn't to be underestimated. He was the #1 genius of Frigid Gale sect, the second most popular contender for the champion seat in the Master Teacher tournament. Not knowing how to reply, Ruohuan Gongzi replied awkwardly, that you shouldn't underestimate Zhang Shi, he's quite formidable. Liao Wuji harumphed. It's only because you don't know how fearsome the ghost domain illusory city is. Fearsome? The duo was taken aback. Could it be that brother Liao knows something about it? Of course. I once read an introduction about it in a book. Tilting up his chin, a hint of pride gleamed in Liao Wuji's eyes. Given how most pavilion masters were unaware of it, he could be considered to be knowledgeable for knowing it. The ghost domain illusory city harnesses the concepts of Qi Men Dun Jia, which could be classified into 3 mystics, 8 gates, and 6 jias. It contains the spirits of Jifu, Tingsha, Taiyin, Liuhe, Baihu, Xuanhu, Jiudi, and Jiutian. Those who enter its premises would fall into an endless spiral of fear. Those who lack the appropriate temperament will find their mental fortitude breached and lose their confidence. With both his hands behind his back, Liao Wuji spoke with the composure and confidence reminiscent of a great strategist. I've heard of Zhang Shi's affairs, and I'm indeed impressed by how he was able to become a 4-star master teacher at such a young age. Just the fact that he was able to defeat you, Ruohuan Gongzi, means that he is indeed capable, but in the end, he's still too young. Furthermore, given his smooth-sailing life that lacks experiences of defeat, his mental fortitude must be lacking. This test will likely be where he will be halted. As one of the strongest contender for the champion spot, his analytical ability was beyond ordinary. Zhang Shi might be young, but being chosen as the candidate of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance meant that there was indeed something extraordinary about him. As such, Liao Wuji didn't look down on him just because of his age. But while Zhang Shi was indeed a genius, he was still way too young and had yet to mature yet. His weak mental fortitude would be his greatest opening. This test would be the greatest difficulty he had ever faced. If my conjecture proves to be accurate, his mental fortitude will definitely be breached within 5 to 10 minutes. Liao Wuji predicted. 5 to 10 minutes. The ghost domain illusory city is simply too formidable. Based on my calculation, even for me, I'll only be able to hold on for around an incense's time. In terms of that, the timing which Hong Shi decided on for the test was indeed precise. It is unlikely that there'll be any participants who can persevere any longer than that. Given Zhang Shi's young age, it would already be incredible if he could hold on for 5 minutes. Liao Wuji waved his hands proudly, and just as he was about to continue, he suddenly froze. As though he had seen a ghost, his body stiffened, eyes widened, and lips trembled uncontrollably. What is going on? Chapter 577, Can it be fixed? Zhang Xian pushed open the doors to enter the illusory city. Its interior was pitch black, such that he couldn't even see his outstretched hand. Taking 2 steps along the corridor, a sinister wind blew past, bringing an eerie voice to his ear. Woo woo woo. The voice was drenched with resentment and adoration, sorrow and happiness. It struck right into one's soul, rendering the action of covering one's ears meaningless. Is this soul beguilement? Zhang Xian frowned. Mo Hunsheng had once used a similar technique against him back in the Soul Oracle tomb. Such techniques allowed the voice to resound within one's soul. It would be useless even if one were to inhibit all 6 senses. Lifting his gaze, Zhang Xian saw countless savage eyes staring at him, threatening to leap out at him at any moment to tear him into shreds. To face hair-standing sorrowful cries and the threat of impending attacks under such a dark environment, this was indeed a test on one's temperament. If one's mental fortitude wasn't strong enough, one might just faint on the spot. Boom! Just as Zhang Xian was scanning the surroundings curiously, he suddenly felt a powerful surge of energy gushing out from a corner of the room. It flowed along with the whistling of the wind, heading straight for him. His eyes immediately narrowed, and he leaped forward. But right after he dodged the attack, he felt another powerful surge of energy heading right for him. Dodging it with a leap, before Zhang Xian could land on the floor, he felt yet another attack coming from a different direction. After dodging 7 to 8 of such attacks, a droplet of cold sweat dripped from Zhang Xian's chin. He was starting to panic. The attacks were becoming more and more frequent. If this went on, it would reach a point where Zhang Xian would be unable to cope at all, and this might potentially end in severe injuries for him. Could this test really be that difficult? No, something's wrong. I could feel the energy and disturbance in the air from the previous attacks, but I didn't hear any sound of collision between the wall and the surge of energy. After avoiding a few more attacks, a thought suddenly struck Zhang Xian, leaving him stunned for a moment. He could hear the sharp whistling of the wind due to the barrage of attacks raining down on him, but somehow, the sound of collision when the force struck the wall or ground was absent. Even if Zhang Xian dodged the attack, the force should have struck the wall or the ground, leaving behind a deep imprint or at least a mark of some kind, but there wasn't anything like that at all. Could the attacks be an illusion too? Eye of Insight. Thinking such, Zhang Xian activated the Eye of Insight. In an instant, the darkness veiling his vision lightened, allowing him to see the rough outline of the entire room. The Eye of Insight allows one to peer into the essence of everything. While it was impossible for Zhang Xian's Eye of Insight to peer through the entire Ghost Domain illusory city given the powerful might of the artifact, it wasn't too much of a problem for him to just see through the facades contained within the interior of a single room. And in an instant, he saw that the origin of the piercing wind sound that he heard previously was actually countless spirit beings lingering in the surroundings. It was impossible to tell whether these spirit beings were originally human, spirit beasts, or simply artificial beings. While they were able to stir up an intense wind through their motion, it was completely harmless to one's physical body. That was also the reason why the wall and floor remained undamaged. But still, if Zhang Xian didn't have the Eye of Insight, he would have never dared to face that powerful, frenzied surge of energy even if someone were to inflate his guts. Other competitors might have been helpless before these spirit beings, and it would just be a matter of time before they crumbled before the immense pressure on them. But this won't work on me. Upon understanding the origin behind the attacks, Zhang Xian's lips curled up into a smile. Unable to see or perceive these spirit beings, the other competitors would indeed be unable to deal with these spirit beings. It would just be a matter of time before the mounting pressure crushed their mental fortitude, snapping their thread of sanity. But as a soul oracle, if he were to allow mere spirit beings to get the better of him, it would indeed be embarrassing. Draw soul. Zhang Xian's glabella glowed, and a soul-bearing semblance to his physical appearance emerged from his body. Wang! Zhang Xian clasped his hands together, and a glow of light flashed across the room. The spirit beings, as though having met their nemesis, quickly fled in fear. The soul of soul oracles possessed extraordinary soul energy, and not to mention, the cultivation technique which Zhang Xian practiced was the Heaven's Path soul art, granting his soul a mighty aura that ghosts dared not stand up against. It was already a huge benevolence, as well as a gesture of respect to Hong Shi, that he didn't consume these spirit beings to nourish his soul. After chasing away those troublemaking spirit beings, the room fell silent. Returning back to his body, Zhang Xian stood up to start looking for the exit when a thought suddenly struck him, and a smile slowly surfaced on his face. Why do I even need to search around? As long as I determine the flaws behind this artifact, wouldn't I be able to find the exit easily? Given that Zhang Xian was attacked by so many soul beings right after he entered the ghost domain illusory city, who knew what else he might face later on? It would be too much trouble to go through everything. Since he had the Library of Heaven's Path, he could simply find the flaws behind the ghost domain illusory city and, just like with formations, pause its functioning. In any case, pausing a formation wouldn't damage it. Its functions could be easily restored after he left, and it wouldn't affect the challengers after him. With such a thought in mind, Zhang Xian placed his hand on the floor, and a book materialized in the Library of Heaven's Path. Ghost Domain Illusory City, forged by 5-star master teacher Fei Yuzi. It harnesses the concepts of mystic gates hidden Jia and contains innumerable spirit beings. It can be used as a test to train one's temperament. Flaws. Number 1, the stone pedestal at the center serving as the control center is easily noticeable. A detailed explanation on the ghost domain illusory city could be seen on the book. The stone pedestal at the center is the control center. With the eye of insight active, Zhang Xian proceeded forward and saw a stone pedestal with a height similar to his. Isn't this way too conspicuous? Seeing that something this important was actually placed so openly in the artifact, Zhang Xian shook his head. But soon, he came to a realization. Often, the most dangerous of location tended to be the safest, and sometimes, placing it at the most conspicuous spot may make one overlook it due to their subconscious mind instinctively acknowledging the impossibility of it. Besides, the cultivators that enter the illusory city would have their hands full with dealing with the spirit beings. Even if they were to see the stone pedestal, they wouldn't have the spare energy to think of such things. Since this is the control center, will the ghost domain illusory city come to a halt if I were to knock this pedestal aside? Too lazy to read on, Zhang Xian closed the book, and with his eye of insight still active, he began assessing the stone pedestal. He couldn't tell what the stone pedestal was made of, but it was exceptionally hard. Looking around it, Zhang Xian wasn't able to find any mechanism around it. He tried pushing the pedestal with his hands, but as though connected with the fortress, it didn't budge in the least. I don't believe that I can't move it. Heaven's Path fist art. Frowning, Zhang Xian gathered all of his strength in his fists, and as though a released arrow, his fists shot toward the stone pedestal. Pang! His fist struck the stone pedestal, but there was nothing except for a slight tremor. On the contrary, he felt a stinging pain on his fist. What a hard stone! Zhang Xian was astonished. His strength totaled up to 2,600,000 ding, and complemented with the Heaven's Path fist art, even a primary tier spirit weapon would be crushed instantly. And yet, not only did this ordinary-looking stone pedestal not budge in the least, his fist even grew red from the impact. The stone pedestal must be at least a spirit intermediate tier artifact, or perhaps even higher than that. To be able to withstand his attack, this stone pedestal had to be an incredible artifact similar to the illusory city. What should I do now? Zhang Xian rubbed his glabella. He had finally found a way to stop the ghost domain illusory city, but due to his lacking cultivation, he wasn't able to do it. This felt extremely stifling to him. Wait. I might not be able to move it, but I can always draw on the help of others. After a moment of contemplation, Zhang Xian's eyes suddenly lit up. He was incapable of moving it with his current strength, but he could always draw on the strength of others, such as his clone. Back then, when he exchanged blows with that fellow, he was crushed completely. The physical body of his clone was truly powerful beyond words. Come out. Willing so, Zhang Xian's clone appeared before him. He had placed this fellow into his storage ring before heading over here, so summoning him hinged only on a single thought. Given the shared consciousness between the duo, the clone instantaneously understood the plight Zhang Xian was in. Thus, Zhang Xian ordered directly, break this stone pedestal to stop the formation. All right. The clone tightened his fists and released a punch. Heaven's Path Fist Art. Kacha. Kacha. With a crisp sound, a crack appeared in the stone pedestal before him. The crack swiftly crept across the entire pedestal, and voila, it crumbled into rubble. Can't you hold back a little? Zhang Xian's eyes widened in rage. Wasn't this stone pedestal so tough such that even his fists suffered great pain from the backlash of his attack? Why did it suddenly break just like that? Didn't it seem like his clone had used too much strength? Could it be that clone's physical body is simply too powerful, such that it induced a suppression effect on the stone pedestal? After a moment of bewilderment, Zhang Xian suddenly came to a realization, and he felt tears threatening to spill from his face. Due to the Nine Hearts Lotus being a god artifact, even if his clone didn't use too much strength, he could still destroy the stone pedestal easily. To make an analogy, it was just like putting a diamond against a dagger. While the dagger might be more efficient in a battle, in terms of ability to scratch glass, the diamond would be much more effective. He was just like the dagger whereas his clone was the diamond. While the latter didn't use too much strength behind his attack, the stone pedestal still crumbled easily. Zhang Xian only intended to move the stone pedestal, but in the end he ended up destroying it instead. Hong Long. Conflicted, Zhang Xian was just considering what he should do next when the entire Ghost Domain illusory city rumbled and started shaking violently. With its core destroyed, the formation supporting the illusory city was completely crippled. Thus, the gigantic infrastructure immediately started crumbling. Keep. Returning his clone to his storage ring, he glanced upward, only to see huge lumps of rock raining down on him. Knowing that it was too late for him to escape, he could only raise his arms to protect his head from the falling rocks. Given how formidable Yang Shi is, his student should have no trouble clearing the Ghost Domain illusory city. Outside, on the round stage, Heng Shi had been pacing back and forth worriedly ever since Zhang Xian walked in. Yang Shi had sent his student here to temper him, not to have him eliminated in the first round. But thinking deeper into the matter, given how powerful Yang Shi was, how could his student be anything simple? The Ghost Domain illusory city might be powerful, but I've already adjusted the difficulty such that at least 85% of the 56 challengers would be able to clear it. Zhang Shi shouldn't be eliminated here. Now, the only problem is how long it will take for him to clear the challenge. There was another benefit to the Ghost Domain illusory city: it could determine how powerful one's mental fortitude was. The faster one could escape from it, the stronger one's mental fortitude was. Since there was no need to worry about Zhang Shi's elimination, the main problem at hand would be how long he would take to clear the test. I would require 7 minutes to clear the illusory city. No matter how strong the mental fortitude of the participants is, they will need at least 10 minutes to clear the challenge. Considering Zhang Shi's age, it would be an incredible feat if he could clear the challenge in around 13 minutes. Heng Shi calculated internally. Seeing that there was still time, Heng Shi was just about to find a place to sit down and wait when the ground beneath him suddenly shook violently. He anxiously lifted his head to take a look, only to see the humongous Ghost Domain illusory city rumbling loudly before collapsing inward. After which, a figure with both arms raised above his head, a silhouette reminiscent of a valiant warrior, appeared amidst the cloud of dust. On the warrior's face was a sheepish smile. The warrior scratched his head apologetically and said, "Heng Shi, it seems like I accidentally broke your Ghost Domain illusory city. Can it be fixed?" Chapter 578, the fearsome otherworldly demonic tribe, fixed. Looking at the remaining rubble of the majestic castle from before, Hong Shi's body stiffened, and he nearly fainted on the spot. If you only broke a face of a wall or a corridor, I might still be able to fix it. But this, how in the world do you expect me to fix this? Fix your head. It's just a test. If you can clear it, so be it. If you can't, it's nothing much as well. May I ask, how in the world did my ghost domain illusory city offend you for you to hold such a heavy grudge against it? Besides, how long has it been? 2 minutes? 3 minutes? In such a short period of time, even I would be unable to reach the center. How in the world did you manage to tear it down? Hong Shi's heart nearly stopped then, and he was about to go insane. Indeed, contrary to Hong Shi's frenzied response, Pavilion Master Kong and the other elders from the Myriad Kingdom Alliance Master Teacher Pavilion slapped their faces, as if they'd known that this would occur. They knew that something would go awry, but even so, they underestimated the extent to which things could go awry at. This was the Master Teacher Tournament. Under such circumstances, how was the test supposed to proceed? The Ghost Domain Illusory City was the key to testing the candidate's temperament. Given that it had collapsed, how are the other participants going to be assessed? To cut off other people's path while walking your own, Zhang Shi, aren't you being a little too competitive? While they were all speechless, Liao Wuji's body also swayed weakly from side to side in shock. It was just a moment ago that Ruohuan Gongzi said that he was worried about the safety of the Ghost Domain Illusory City, and he mocked the other party for being ignorant. But from the looks of it now, it seemed like he was the one being ignorant. To tear down an entire fortress 3 minutes after walking in, you aren't a master teacher but a demolisher, right? While silence loomed in the surroundings, Zhang Xian patted the dust off his body and stepped away from the rubble with a helpless expression. All he wanted to do was to silently halt the formation and walk out normally. Why was such a simple wish so hard to realize? It's impossible to fix it. Even though Hong Shi's heart was hurting so much that it was dripping blood, and he was about to faint from anger. But he quickly forced himself to calm down and recover. No matter what, the other party was Yang Shi's student. Furthermore, it wasn't an intentional action on the other party's part, so it was best for him to just overlook this matter. While he still felt it was a huge loss to lose a treasure of the Ghost Domain Illusory City's caliber, given that it was already destroyed, there was no use pondering over it. Thus, he could only swallow his pain and accept his loss. Just that, given that the illusory city was completely wrecked, how were the others supposed to take the test? The other master teachers also shot glances over. After a moment of hesitation, Hong Shi gritted his teeth and said, "Since the Ghost Domain Illusory City has been damaged, we'll put aside the temperament test for the time being and move on to the courage test." Even though having a single test voided in the preliminary round would affect the results, it was still at a level where he could overlook. Courage test. How is it going to be carried out? Upon hearing the next test, everyone swiftly recovered from their shock, and discussions sounded amidst the crowd. I believe everyone should know the reason behind why Hong Shi established the Master Teacher Pavilion. Hong Shi said. A Master Teacher replied, to strengthen the human race so as to better fend off the otherworldly demonic tribe and other calamities. The primary reason as to why Hong Shi established the Master Teacher Pavilion was to raise the might of the human race as a whole so as to further its prosperity. Indeed. Several 10,000 years ago, the powerful otherworldly demonic tribe committed innumerable atrocities, resulting in grievous sufferings to all life forms. In order to save the world, Hong Shi established the system of master teachers, and after several 10,000 years of development, we've achieved an unprecedented level of prosperity. Hong Shi nodded his head as his gaze fell on the crowd. The courage test is actually very simple. You just have to fulfill the responsibility of a master teacher and face an otherworldly demon. Otherworldly demon? Hasn't that race gone extinct already? Could it be that there are still survivors? Everyone was taken aback. The otherworldly demonic tribe had been expelled by Kong Shi several 10,000 years ago, and not a single trace of them remained on the continent. To face an otherworldly demon, what did Hong Shi mean? The otherworldly demonic tribe was indeed expelled several 10,000 years ago. However, there are still a few remnants living on the continent. They disguise themselves as humans and hide amongst our communities. Hong Shi's eyebrows shot up as he waved his hand. Hula. The fog veiling another corner of the round stage cleared, revealing a gigantic stone house. Even though the stone house was tightly sealed, and its interiors couldn't be seen at all, an intense killing intent emanated from within. It felt as though one would be torn apart just by approaching the stone house. What a savage aura! Could it be that an otherworldly demon is currently inside the stone house? I've heard that the otherworldly demonic tribe has an extremely brutal nature. They regard humans as nothing more than mere ants, and they slaughter them without any guilt whatsoever. As such, an exceptionally dense killing intent lingers around them. This killing intent made it impossible for an ordinary human to approach them. They would simply faint from fright during the encounter, let alone kill them. Even across a stone house, the killing intent emanated is already so astounding. How powerful must the otherworldly demons really be? Feeling the aura coming from within the stone house, everyone's faces warped in shock. Fearsome. All those who were on the round stage were all 4-star master teacher. Even so, the killing intent emanated from within the stone house was sufficient to render their legs wobbly. How powerful must the otherworldly demons be then? The otherworldly demons are callous and cunning. For their growth, they are willing to even devour their own kind. In their eyes, humans are just lower-tier lifeforms, mere prey for them. Hong Shi harumphed. This fellow here has been hiding in Hongfeng Empire, and he had killed at least several thousand humans there. It took me 3 years before I managed to capture him. Even though I've used the golden soul lock to seal his root bone, making it impossible for him to exert much strength, the killing intent that he had tempered over countless years still remains. He could easily exert immense pressure on one's soul and draw out the deepest fear in one. Putting aside 4-star pinnacle master teachers like you all, even half 5-star master teachers would hesitate to face him directly. It is similar to a human meeting a tiger. Even the latter didn't make a move, the former would still instinctively feel fear, and strength would drain from their body. This was a matter of courage. If one doesn't even have the courage to approach a tiger, how could he possibly ever kill one? If a master teacher doesn't dare to approach an otherworldly demon, then no matter how far he advances as a master teacher, it would be for naught. The courage test is simple. You just have approach him, and your courage will be judged by how far you get to him. The requirement for clearing this test is 5 meters, those who fail to meet this requirement will be eliminated. Waving his hands, Hong Shi flicked his finger. Voila! The walls of the stone house immediately burst apart, and a 3-meter-tall savage-looking beast appeared before everyone. Hung Long. As soon as the beast came into view, a violent aura abruptly diffused into the surroundings. Some of the audience seated closer to the round stage suddenly felt an intense vertigo striking their mind, and their vision went dark. They had instinctively fainted out of fright. The master teachers on the stage weren't doing much better either. Song Chao and the other master teachers' faces turned pale, and their lips took on a shade of purple. In the past, the otherworldly demonic tribe had enslaved humans, and if not for Kong Shi creating the Master Teacher Pavilion and eventually expelling them from the Master Teacher continent, the entire continent would still be subjected to their tyranny. Perhaps such primal fear had been deeply imprinted into human instincts, but very few were able to withstand the blow to their soul from the sight of an otherworldly demon. This is an otherworldly demon. Zhang Xian's eyebrows twitched. The fellow before him looked like a gigantic savage beast. Bloodthirst seemed to exude from every single inch of its body, inducing the feeling that one would be torn to shreds if one were to try to approach it. Putting aside the other master teachers, even Zhang Xian found it difficult to approach the otherworldly demon within a 5-meter radius. Fearsome. It was no wonder the master-teacher pavilion dared not let down their guard despite several 10,000 years having passed since the disappearance of the otherworldly demons. They were indeed worthy of such wariness from the master-teacher pavilion. He is bound and unable to move, so you need not worry of being harmed. The time limit is half an incense's time, and those who are unable to get within 5 meters of him will be eliminated. After which, Hong Shi lit an incense and waved his hands. The time starts now. Hearing that the test had started, the crowd on top of the round stage began advancing toward the beast with a grave look on their faces. Zhang Xian followed behind them as well, but with just a single step, his face abruptly lost all color. Just this single step had subjected him to twofold the pressure from before. The savage killing intent lingering in the air stripped his legs of its strength, rendering him unable to proceed further. He glanced at the others around him, and they didn't seem to be in a much better condition than him. Sweat covered their foreheads, and their faces were as pale as a sheet of paper. Forcefully taking another step forward, the pressure intensified yet again. It was as if he was a lone boat standing before a huge storm. Powerful waves rushed at him, threatening to sink him at any moment. At the same time, it was as if he was standing right at the edge of a cliff. A single step forward would mean plummeting into a vici and subjected to an eternity of suffering. Under such circumstances even 10 meters would be difficult, not to mention 5 meters. Initially, Zhang Xian thought that this test would be a walk in the park, but it turned out to be tougher than he had expected. It seemed that with his willpower itself, it would be impossible for him to pass this step. Advancing another step forward, only 10 competitors remained alongside him. Let me try driving my Jinqi. Taking yet another step forward, Zhang Xian felt as though he was coming to the limit of his endurance. Thus, he decided to drive his Jinqi. He didn't use his Jinqi to ward off the killing intent beforehand so as to test his own limits. But regrettably, 4 steps seemed to be it. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't take a single inch forward. Who? As the Heaven's Path Jinqi flowed through his body, the pressure weighing down on him immediately disappeared, and the tenseness he felt faded. That energy that threatened to rip him apart a moment ago felt nothing more than a gentle breeze on him at this moment. As I expected, the Heaven's Path Jinqi is indeed capable of neutralizing killing intent. The Heaven's Path Jinqi possessed no attribute whatsoever, but this allowed it to neutralize all types of attributes of all types. Zhang Xian had previously guessed that driving the Heaven's Path Jinqi would neutralize the killing intent from the otherworldly demons, and fortunately, it seemed like he was spot on. He secretly peeked at the others different from him. The others had been driving their Jinqi right from their start, but that did little to alleviate their pale complexion. But even so, with their sheer determination, those at the front were already approaching the 10-meter mark. Incredible. Seeing how they were able to proceed so far despite being unable to neutralize the killing intent effectively with their Jinqi, a hint of respect appeared on Zhang Xian's face. It was no wonder they were known as geniuses, and why Pavilion Master Kong didn't think well of them. They did possess the qualities worthy of their evaluation. If not for Zhang Xian cheating through his Heaven's Path Jinqi, it was hard to tell whether he could have traveled further than them. Relieved on the immense pressure on him, Zhang Xian's thoughts gradually grew lively. Could the immense pressure exerted by the otherworldly demon be considered as a battle technique as well? Given how everyone was so frightened such that it was difficult for them to approach the otherworldly demon, the latter was clearly utilizing some kind of ability to exert pressure on one's soul. Even if this ability couldn't be considered as a battle technique, it should be close to one. Given so, is it possible for the Library of Heaven's Path to peer into the flaws of the otherworldly demon? Flaws? Zhang Xian willed. Who? A book materialized in the Library of Heaven's Path. Chapter 579, Zhang Xian. In a daze he was only trying his luck, but to his delight, it actually worked. Excited, Zhang Xian's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly flipped through its contents. The offspring of an otherworldly life form and spirit beast. Born in Wangyuan Mountain of Hongfeng Empire. Cultivation of transcendent mortal 5 Dan consonant spirit realm flaws. He isn't a purebred otherworldly demon but a progeny with a spirit beast. Zhang Xian blinked his eyes. To think that this fellow, who was powerful enough to halt the advancement of a 4-star master teacher with its disposition in itself was just a hybrid. If that was the case, how powerful must a purebred be? Not to mention, to actually breed with a spirit beast the tastes of the otherworldly demonic tribe sure was heavy. The thought of satisfying one's physical needs with that gigantic and swollen body of a spirit beast Zhang Xian couldn't help but shiver in disgust. But even so, this fellow is indeed strong. Based on the information in the book, the other party's physical body and soul were extremely powerful, such that it would be able to easily rival master teachers of the similar cultivation realm, or rather, master teachers who hadn't been through special training to cope with its overwhelming killing intent wouldn't be able to even get close to it. It was no wonder the master teacher pavilion was so fearful of the otherworldly demon tribe. There was a clear and huge difference in the innate talent between humans and the otherworldly demon tribe. My heaven's path, Xinqi doesn't fear the pressure he exerts. I'll just approach a 5-meter radius around him and remain there for a moment. Zhang Xian had just destroyed Heng Shi's ghost domain illusory city, thus putting him at the tip of others' tongues. Even though he could clear this test easily, he felt that he shouldn't cause too much of a fuss this time round. In any case, it was just the preliminary selections and there was no ranking for this. It would suffice as long as he passed the test, there was no need for him to show off. Thinking so, Zhang Xian lifted his gaze to look at the others in the surroundings. In the time that he spent browsing through the book, the others had already gotten ahead of him. There were quite a few who were in proximity to the huge beast already, just a few steps away to reaching the 5-meter mark. Even though their movements looked very strained, their ability to get to such proximity reflected their courage and determination. It was no wonder why they were the representatives of their respective powers. They did possess extraordinary mental fortitude and talent. That Luo Xian is leading the group. Walking at the forefront was Luo Xian from Fleeting Clouds sect. He was listed to be the #1 contender for the champion placing in the book pavilion Master Kong showed him, and it did seem to be very plausible at this moment. As long as one were to get into a 5-meter radius of the otherworldly demon, one would be considered to have passed the test. As for Song Chao, he was in the middle of the entire group. On the other hand, Ruohuan Gongzi exceeded Zhang Xian's expectations. Surprisingly, he was amongst the group at the front. Should I go over now, or should I wait a little longer? Forget it, I'm in no hurry anyway. I should first look through that fellow's flaws first. Seeing that no one had reached the 5-meter mark yet, Zhang Xian decided to continue reading the book first. There were many flaws detailed on the hybrid otherworldly demon in the book in the Library of Heaven's Path, so it was taking Zhang Xian a little longer to finish reading through it. In any case, he didn't want to catch too much attention by being the first to clear the test anyway. Thus, he decided to wait a little longer. Beneath the stage. Ruohuan seems to be faring well. To think that he would achieve such outstanding results right from the start. Elder Su stroked his beard as he said. Indeed. The otherworldly demonic tribe sure is fearsome. I don't think that I could achieve his current results even if I were to head up. Ling Shi sighed. It was their first time meeting an otherworldly demon as well. They were already feeling stifled from the intense killing intent even though they were beneath the stage. It was difficult for them to imagine the pressure that was weighing down on the competitors at the moment. It seems like the advice I told him worked after all. Hearing the compliments of his two friends, Pavilion Master Kong smiled. Oh. What did you tell him to motivate him so much as to rush straight into the top few placing? Su Shi and Ling Shi asked curiously. They couldn't imagine any advice that could induce such a huge change in one. Even though Ruohuan Gongzi did improve greatly in the past 2 months, he was still a distance away from matching up to the top geniuses from the other sects and empires. I told him that there's nothing he has to be worried about, and he should just give it his all. After all, is there anything in this world that is more fearsome than Zhang Shi? Since he doesn't even fear Zhang Shi, why should he hesitate over anything? Pavilion Master Kong stroked his beard. Cough cough, Su Shi and Ling Shi staggered. They were rendered speechless by the words of their old friend. But giving it some thoughts, while these words were indeed a little peculiar, it was indeed good advice. A fellow who could collapse even the ghost domain illusory city in 2 to 3 minutes. If Ruohuan Gongzi didn't even fear such a monster, what did he have to fear from the other geniuses out there? Just that, to use Zhang Shi to suppress the fear toward otherworldly demons. Why does it feel as though something is wrong? After a moment of speechlessness, Su Shi suddenly frowned and said, "Right, why isn't Zhang Shi moving? Could he be at his limit?" Zhang Shi proceeded rather swiftly initially, but after advancing 4 steps, he abruptly came to a stop and hadn't moved since. It had been several minutes since then. Could it be that he was unable to withstand the pressure from the otherworldly demon? Even though he possesses astounding capability, he's still much too young. It's his first time meeting an otherworldly demon, and it's unavoidable that he would freeze in fear. Ling Shi shook his head. I don't know what's going on either. Actually, I thought of the same thing too, but what I'm more worried about is that, Pavilion Master Kong shook his head, he might cause something huge once more. Cause something huge? I think it's unlikely for that to happen. Given the strength of the otherworldly demon, even you and I wouldn't be a match for it, and he's currently only at Transcendent Mortal 3 Dan Pinnacle. Besides, the goal of the test is just to approach the otherworldly demon. How could any problem occur from this? Su Shi shook his head. There's no need for you to worry about this. I hope so, Pavilion Master Kong nodded, and just as he was about to speak, he suddenly froze. Then, lifting a finger up to the stage, he exclaimed, "How can that be?" Hearing the anxiousness in the latter's voice, Su Shi and Ling Shi hurriedly turned their gazes over, and their eyes narrowed uncontrollably. As Luo Xian and the others stepped into a 5-meter mark, the otherworldly demon, who had his eyes shut all along, opened abruptly, and a sinister light gleamed in his blood-red eyes. To dare use me as a test of courage, you are courting death. A voice boomed as though thunder, rattling everyone's soul. The immense body of the otherworldly demon shook, and in an instant, everyone abruptly felt as though they were plunged into a storm. Ah! The few master teachers standing at the very front cried out in agony simultaneously. Their bodies lost all strength and they fell helplessly to the ground from fright. Luo Xian wasn't spared either. His body stiffened, and he looked as though his soul had escaped from his body. You lowly creatures, how dare you capture and use me? I'll devour every single one of you, roaring furiously, the otherworldly demon's glaring red lips parted, revealing rows after rows of sharp teeth. The sight of it left goosebumps rising through one's body, inducing a sensation as though one would be torn to shreds just by approaching him. I'm not going to compete anymore. Before the otherworldly demon could finish his words, a pale-faced master teacher abruptly screamed as he scrambled off the stage. A pool of pungent fluid was left in his wake. With a precedent, the second and the third soon emerged. For 4-star master teacher geniuses to actually be reduced to such a state. The crowd below fell completely silent. But even so, no one thought that they were cowardly. After all, none of them could say that they would do better when put in such a position as well. The otherworldly demon was already fearsome when it was idle, now that it was roaring and baring its fangs, it would be wonder if the others could hold on. To think that even trash life forms like you all would be able to rule over the continent, the world sure has regressed. Seeing some of the participating master teachers escape and the rest collapsed on the floor, the otherworldly demon sneered. Just as he was going to drive all of them away in a single breath, he saw a young man standing quietly at a distance away, seemingly in a daze. In a daze? Aren't all of you here to test your courage? What the heck are you dazing off for? Besides, I've been roaring here and there, and I even intensified the killing aura to the maximum. Even a half 5-star master teacher would find it hard to withstand the pressure. And yet, a little fellow like you is actually unfazed. With a livid expression, the otherworldly demon focused all of its killing intent on the young man and roared. Little fellow, do you think you are courageous? Let's see how courageous you can be after you're dead, Walala. The voice, tinged with overpowering killing intent, swept across the entire stage as though a hurricane. It was so strong that a 4-star master teacher beneath the stage even fell off his seat and fainted. All of the 4-star master teachers collapsed on the ground, huddled their bodies together in fear, not daring to even breathe loudly. But the young man whom he focused all of his killing intent on was still standing silently on the spot with all of his attention devoted to dazing off. It seemed as though the other party didn't even notice his attack. I'll kill you. Not expecting that he, despite being a proud otherworldly demon, would actually be disregarded by such a young master teacher, his rage was unleashed. Back then, Hong Shi had to deploy more than 70 master teachers before he was able to capture him. And in that battle, he had managed to slay at least 20 of them and severely injured another 30. Even Hong Shi, a 5-star master teacher, was afraid of him. And yet, a 4-star primary master teacher actually dared to disregard him? This was too much. Boom! An even more powerful aura gushed into the surroundings, and upon feeling the killing intent infused into the aura, even Hong Shi's face paled. Yet, the young man before him continued on in his daze. It was as if nothing mattered before him. Neither the pressure nor the killing intent he exerted was able to faze the young man at all. This I knew that Zhang Shi would surely stir something up, but still to think that it really happened. The faces of Pavilion Master Kong, Su Shi, and the other elders paled as they trembled uncontrollably. Naturally, the young man was Zhang Xian. Despite the odds, they thought that something would happen since Zhang Shi was involved. And as though not to let down their expectations, something did indeed happen. The other party was an otherworldly demon, even they themselves found it hard to cope with that overpowering killing intent. Yet, even though the bulk of the other party's killing intent was focused on you, you are actually dazing off. Could you at least give a reaction, even if it's only out of respect for your opponent? To be dazing away on a battlefield like this, what in the world are you up to? It can't be that Zhang Shi has fainted from fear. Fainted? If he has fainted, how can he still be standing? Furthermore, he was still looking around a moment ago, but if he is still conscious, what can he be doing? The otherworldly demon is exerting so much pressure that he is about to spew blood. How can there be no reaction on Zhang Shi's part at all? This I have no idea as well. They weren't the only ones who noticed that something was amiss. The other master teachers and the crowd beneath also noticed the peculiarity, and they were staring at one another in bewilderment, confused over the situation unfolding before them. The otherworldly demon, with its innate ability to instill fear into a soul, left all of the competitors paralyzed on the floor, not daring to even utter a word. And yet, despite focusing its attention on Zhang Shi, roaring relentlessly and baring its fangs, the latter remained completely impassive. Big brother, do you really not fear the otherworldly demon, or are you dead already? Chapter 580, Kill Yourself. Just as everyone had seen, the otherworldly demon was truly on the verge of falling into a frenzy. Even if you don't fear, you need not make it so obvious, do you? I'm already putting in all my effort into it. Even if just to acknowledge my effort, you should at least give a reaction. Look at how everyone above and beneath the stage has collapsed on the ground. You are the only one standing there, unfazed. At this point, aren't you being a little too disrespectful to me, your opponent? I'll kill you. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. Roaring once more, the tall otherworldly demon gritted his teeth and a mouthful of blood spewed from his mouth. His eyes grew even redder, and the callous aura shrouding him intensified. This is bad. The otherworldly demon is activating Blood Berserk. Blood Berserk? Indeed. On top of their powerful physical bodies and souls, the otherworldly demon are also capable of burning their blood essence in exchange for raising their fighting prowess temporarily. I've read the History of the War Against the Otherworldly Demons written by Master Teacher Zheng Shao, and it states that many Master Teachers have died under such attacks. Then what should we do? I don't know either. However, since Hong Shi has sealed his root bone with the Golden Soul Lock, he shouldn't be able to exert any strength. Seeing the huge fellow going into a rampage, a look of worry appeared on the faces of the knowing Master Teachers below the stage. An otherworldly demon in his normal state was already sufficiently frightening, how fearsome would he be once he went into a berserk state? Hong Shi grasped a weapon tightly in his hands. As soon as that fellow made a move, he would slaughter the other party without any hesitation. But even so, at the current moment, he was still confident in the ability of the Golden Soul Lock in sealing the otherworldly demon's movements. As long as the otherworldly demon was unable to break out of his restraints, it shouldn't be a problem at all. After all, the main point of this test was to assess the courage of the participants. As such, there was no need for him to make a move as long as there was no threat to the participant's life. Besides, it took him a lot of effort to capture this otherworldly demon alive. He was hoping to take him to the headquarters to claim his reward. If he were to kill him, he wouldn't be able to claim any reward at all. Hong Long. Amidst everyone's frightened gaze, the otherworldly demon finally activated Blood Berserk fully and roared at Zhang Xian. The killing intent and the pressure harnessed within the roar seemed as though thunder booming from the highest heaven. Jia, the round stage creaked, seemingly unable to withstand the pressure. All of the Master Teachers and cultivators around the young man trembled uncontrollably in fear, not daring to move in the slightest. And yet Zhang Xian still remained in his daze, completely indifferent to the other party's offense. The otherworldly demon was about to explode in rage. After struggling for a moment, fresh blood spurted from his mouth once more. Stepping forcefully against the ground, he advanced forward. Even though he was incapable of fighting due to his root bone being sealed by the Golden Soul Lock, he was still able to move around. The only reason why he'd remained stationary previously was in fear that Hong Shi would kill him. But panicked and enraged, he couldn't care as much anymore. I'll kill you, Walla. With his gigantic head at a distance less than 50 meters before Zhang Xian, it roared furiously. Even at such a far distance away, the immense pressure the otherworldly demon exerted could leave countless trembling helplessly in fear. At such a close proximity, it would surely feel as though one was already in death's embrace, leaving one completely terror-stricken and hysterical. And yet Zhang Xian remained completely motionless, still in his daze. Hong Shi couldn't stand looking at it anymore. What the heck are you doing? Even if you are dazing off, isn't this going a bit too far? Ah! Hearing someone shout his name, Zhang Xian finally returned to his senses. The introduction and the flaws concerning the otherworldly demon was simply too long and too shocking. Despite the vast knowledge Zhang Xian had gathered through the books he had read before, he still found himself astonished by its contents, thus resulting in his attention being completely absorbed in the book. As for the other party's roaring, Zhang Xian thought that the fellow was simply trying to scare some other participant, and as such, he didn't pay it much heed. As soon as he drew his consciousness out from the book, he suddenly saw a hideous face right before him. Alarmed, he sent a slap right at the other party. Pa! A crisp sound echoed across the round stage. Everyone was dumbfounded. The otherworldly demon's eyes also widened in frenzy. In order to exert further pressure on the other party's soul, he burned his blood essence to intensify his killing intent. He even went to the extent of laboriously making his way here just so to teach this arrogant brat a lesson, and yet, not only did the other party remain completely unfazed, the other party even slapped him. You lowly human, die. With his mind clouded with wrath, the otherworldly demon couldn't care less about the golden soul lock any longer. He raised his immense fist and sent it right toward the young man before him. Hoo-hoo! A piercing wind screamed in the surroundings. With his root bone sealed, the otherworldly demon could only tap into the strength of his physical body. But even so, blessed with strong innate physique, his physical strength wasn't one that a transcendent mortal 3-Dan cultivator could withstand. You beast, you're seeking death. Seeing how the otherworldly demon actually dared to make a move, Hong She's eyebrows shot up. Raising his sword, he prepared to make a move. But before he could do anything, Zhang Xian leaped to the side, dodging the attack. Then, with a displeased look on his face, he glared at the otherworldly demon. Audacious! Who are you calling lowly? Flinging his sleeves, Zhang Xian stood upright. His master-teacher robe danced along with the slight tug of the wind, creating an impression of an incredible expert. As an offspring of an otherworldly demon and a dust-shell beast, your blood is impure and your energy is adulterated. Not to mention, the technique you use to exert pressure on others' soul is filled with flaws. Given how you can't even deal with an ordinary human like me, what rights do you have to say that humans are lowly? Not expecting the person before him to identify his origins, the otherworldly demon was stunned. For a moment, he forgot his rage against the other party. What? Is there anything wrong about what I said? With his hands behind his back, Zhang Xian slowly walked up to the otherworldly demon. It's one thing for your blood to be adulterated, but you didn't even receive the heritage that an otherworldly demon should possess at birth. To grow stronger, you had to study the human language and practice human cultivation techniques. And yet, you dare to say that humans are lowly? What gave you the confidence to utter such words? The otherworldly demon subconsciously took a step back in fear. What is going on? Seeing how Zhang Shi, who was still dazing off a moment ago, lecturing the otherworldly demon as soon as he came to again, the crowd stared at one another as though they had seen a ghost. Even Hong Shi was bewildered by the situation as well. This fellow actually wasn't a pure-blooded otherworldly demon. Given how he, despite being the one who captured the otherworldly demon, didn't notice it, how did Zhang Shi know about it? And how could he have known that the other half of the other party's blood came from the dust shell beast? More importantly, despite being a 5-star master teacher, he was unaware of the heritage of otherworldly demons. And yet, this fellow actually knew about it. Could Yang Shi have taught him that? It wouldn't be surprising for an 8-star master teacher like Yang Shi to know of such deep secrets of the otherworldly demons. Despite reaching 5-star, Hong Shi had yet to advance to even higher master teacher pavilions, and as such, he didn't know much about such matters. You were born in a village on Wangyuan Mountain of Hongfeng Empire, and you were adopted and raised by humans. Before 20, other than your large head, you were no different from a human, and you didn't know about your unique heritage either. Yet, in a minor dispute with a villager, you killed the latter. And when the parents who raised you questioned you about the matter, out of rage, you awakened your bloodline as an otherworldly demon and killed them as well. Zhang Xian glanced at the otherworldly demon. Am I right? The otherworldly demon trembled in fear. He was indeed raised by humans. It was a poor village, and the villagers there led a simple life. Perhaps it was due to this that they possessed an innocence contrary to the depravity existent in cities. Even though he had a huge appetite from young due to his larger stature, his parents treated him kindly. No matter how poor they were, they never allowed him to starve. There was once when it snowed 5 days consecutively, and the house ran out of food. Bearing the risk of a snowstorm, his parents went out to hunt, only to come back grievously injured with an ordinary hare in hand and several wild vegetables. The rabbit wasn't large, and it wasn't sufficient to go around the family. In order to not let him starve, the entire rabbit went to him while his parents ate only the plucked wild vegetable. Just the thought of it evoked sympathy for his parents. Even though they were your foster parents, they still doted on you as though you were their real child. But how did you repay them? After awakening your bloodline, you slew the entire village, including your buddies, parents, and kin, and you devoured them all. With a livid expression and sharp eyes, Zhang Xian pushed on. Not only so, you even torched the entire village into ashes. Let me ask you, have you ever felt the slightest regret for your actions? The otherworldly demon trembled once more. Even though he had inherited the brutal nature of the otherworldly demonic tribe, he still grew up amongst humans, and he was taught etiquette and shame. These past memories poked at him as though a thorn in his heart, agitating him constantly, leaving him ashamed. Regret? I did regret my actions, but so what? They were the ones who humiliated me. They said that I looked inhumane and that I was a beast. That's why I killed them all. Was I wrong in exacting my vengeance? The otherworldly demon roared through gritted teeth. You don't think you have done wrong? All right then. After killing your foster parents and torching the village, to fill your stomach, you headed to the closest Yang city. Due to your tall stature and sturdy build, you were recruited to become a bodyguard for a wealthy family. Your employers provided you with decent food, lodging, and even imparted a cultivation technique to you. And yet, how did you repay them? With an icy cold voice, Zhang Xian continued, out of lust for the young mistress of the family, you raped and killed her. And out of fear that your employer would exact vengeance on you upon learning of the matter, you killed his entire clan of 78 people. It's a pity that that old man still believed in you even when your sword was placed right on his throat. Regarding this, there's no mistake in my words, right? There were many flaws in the soul attacks from the otherworldly demon, and it originated from these doubts he harbored in his mind. It was due to the conflict and regret he felt that his temperament slowly declined, resulting in his inability to unleash his full strength. Otherwise, given how fearsome the otherworldly demonic tribe was, it wouldn't be possible for Hong Shi and the other master teachers to capture a mature otherworldly demon so easily. The otherworldly demon trembled yet again. When the Master Teacher Pavilion sent men after you, you slew more than 20 Master Teacher, and even when you were captured by Hong Shi, you still refused to repent. You attempted to escape and recuperate by killing others to absorb their strength. A bastard like you who is neither a human, a beast, nor an otherworldly demon actually dares to claim that humans are lowly. Let me direct the same question to you once more, what right do you have to say that humans are lowly? Before the other party could speak, Zhang Xian pushed further on. His voice carried immense authority that weighed down the otherworldly demon's soul. Despite being an otherworldly demon, you failed to be acknowledged by your tribe. Living in the human world, you ended up killing your kin and friends, thus becoming a scorn of humanity. What right do you have to continue existing on the face of this world? Flinging his sleeves, Zhang Xian spoke with a compelling strength in his voice, kill yourself. The otherworldly demon's body trembled, and his eyes turned into blank voids. Indeed, what right do I have to continue existing on the face of this world? Pa! Lifting his palm, he struck his forehead. His gigantic body swayed and collapsed lifelessly to the floor. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.